what's going on as best we can with the information, analyze the information we're getting, maybe I should say. So that's what's going to be coming up here. I hope everyone will enjoy this. This is Saturday morning, for those maybe watching a bit later, Saturday morning Pacific time. So just to give you frame of reference, those that are new here, either watching live or later on, can you please subscribe to the channel? Love to have you around more often. Now I'm thinking about doing this type of interactive chat because we are live both on Twitch and YouTube. So definitely want your input and questions. So you may want to join us in future ones if you're watching later. Maybe every other week, because I don't know how much news information if we're going to continue this weekly, but we're going to go in and look at it. And we'll go in order of the messages from Irish, I'll call them, RIP Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine is in a bad way, and many people are dying, and it's bad, most assuredly. And hello, John. And over on Twitch, Arno put in first, but he is maybe first on Twitch, but he was not first on YouTube. Hello, Arno. He is my moderator on all channels, so watch and obey him. Right, okay. And good morning, Zizi. Yes. And so this is important. What is going on in the Ukraine? Okay. One thing, if you're new here, my title may, my screen title gamer, you may think just some gamer. Well, gamers, I could have called it war gamers, war game and study history. That's what I have done basically all my life, is study history. So I come at this with a historical perspective. I've been around for a while, and from the times often called it the Ukraine, as in a region, as opposed to Ukraine, the company, or the country, sorry, the country. And so I may call it the Ukraine sometimes in Ukraine. Right, so this this in a way is the first real aggressive war, and this is the sort of the meaning is, what does this mean to, what is going on in the Ukraine mean to all of us? Is the first aggressive war since World War II in Europe that hasn't specifically involved is the breakup of Yugoslavia. Now we could talk about Turkey's invasion, and I thought about getting to some of this, of Cyprus. Is Cyprus in Europe? Maybe. It's obviously an island in the Mediterranean. And Georgia, because it's sort of south of the Caucasus, sort of kind of not in Europe either, when Russia went in there under Bush the Younger. So this is the first major invasion war that's blatant. Well, I guess, in leading up to this, I should say, hardly was much of a fight. But as part of this whole thing, obviously, is going into Crimea. There really wasn't a war over Crimea. So this is, the aggressive invasion war, the first one, and very much how Europe reacted to Crimea, to the invasion of Crimea, is affecting what is happening today, obviously. So how the rest of the world deals with all of this is going to be very telling for the near-term future of the world, okay? That's how important all of this. And like I was saying, I bring a bit of a historical perspective of this. You know, what happened when Germany reclaimed the Saarland? Basically nothing. What happened when Germany remilitarized the Rhineland? Basically nothing. What happened when Germany invaded, although basically no shots were fired, invaded Austria? Because they did invade Austria. Military invasion of Austria. Basically, nothing happened. And the first two were very clear violations of the Treaty of Versailles. Invasion of Austria, more or less, and I don't know if it was set up in a specific treaty, but more or less the Austrians as part of, and the Germans by default, were informed that Austria after World War I was not allowed to become part of Germany. They actually sort of kind of tried to be that way for a few months, but they were told no. So sort of a violation of Austria. And then what happened when Germany invaded Czechoslovakia and took the Sudetenland? Oh, I can tell you what happened. France signed a friendship treaty after this, and France did have a mutual defense treaty with Czechoslovakia. After Germany invades Czechoslovakia and takes just, quote unquote, just the Sudetenland, France signs a treaty of trade and friendship with Germany, renewing our good feelings for Germany. And part of it was, hey, in this treaty, Germany re-acknowledges the current borders to the west, you know, because it lost some territory after World War I. So it was, we have no territorial ambitions going west. And so France signed a treaty, you know, after abandoning Czechoslovakia, of friendship and promoting of trade between France and Nazi Germany. This, you know, happened. And what happened when Germany's second invasion of Czechoslovakia, that was, again, basically no shots were fired, but a military invasion in which they took all of Bohemia and Moravia, and Hungary had already taken a slice off of Czechoslovakia, took a bigger slice off of Czechoslovakia, and Slovakia, Poland had taken a bite out of Czechoslovakia as well, and Slovakia declared its independence. There was a puppet state. Well, then there was a reaction at that point, and what the reaction was at that point was setting up a mutual defense treaty between Britain, France, and Poland. But because of what happened leading up to this, Hitler didn't believe them. This is just another phony show. And then, of course, they meant it this time. This time they meant it. The boy who cried wolf a bunch of times, or the Democrats who cried Russia a bunch of times, and then people stopped believing them. The boy who cried, cried Germany, don't invade so many times. We'll stop you this time. Did actually mean it over Poland finally, and World War II broke out. That is sort of the lesson here. It's analogous. You have Russian, to some degree, intervention into Serbia as part of the breakup of Yugoslavia, Russian invasion into Georgia, Russia supporting breakaway states in Transnistria, Ossetia in Georgia, and other places, as time goes on, they take Ukraine. There are minor over like Ukraine, or not, I'm sorry, not Ukraine, over Crimea, minor trade restrictions. Now we're getting real embargoes being pushed on. Hello, Martin. And anybody in chat, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, or comments. I do want to hear from you guys. I may defer because I do have something of a plan of things to talk about to answer something a bit later. But please do post questions, comments in the chat as we go along here. So the reaction to the world to this aggression is really, really important, because we need governments need to be extremely serious when they draw a line in the sand. Now, one line in the sand governments generally draw is their border. You know, if you put military forces across this border, that means we're at war, kind of thing, and you know, you mean it. And most countries kind of sort of believe that, you know, that'll be war. It's when you do treaties with other nations, proclaim interests. Just what are you going to do? How am I, Martin? I'm doing great. How are you doing today? So the governments need to speak clearly, need to define. It's best to not be too wild-eyed about, you know, what's going to happen, but to go say, hey, if you do this, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and mean it and do it. And so then governments will take a rational look at it if they truly believe it. Oh, well, if we take Ukraine, we're going to have all these bad things happen to us. Well, it may none of them, you know, if it's like, you know, from each nation, what each nation is going to do about it. So, you know, Denmark may just say, oh, well, we're going to freeze all Russian assets and all Russian-owned property in Denmark, and we're going to not allow imports from Russia or something like that. You know, what will Denmark do? You know, over an invasion of a particular country and things. Say it and then mean it, so governments around the world can make rational decisions based upon what they believe the reaction will be. You know, Denmark could say, well, hey, if you invade Germany, we're going to go to war along with Germany and others. You know, so say where you're going to go to war, where you're just going to do trade embargoes and all that kind of stuff. So that is one of the major importance of what the world, and I say the world, and I do mean the world because it can affect situations like Saudi Arabia's intervention into Yemen over the Houthis. It is an invasion, but what the world, generally the UN, the government of Yemen, asked for the Saudi invasion against the Houthi rebels. So it is I don't know if invasion would technically be, because it's military actions going on in there, I should say, and we can criticize maybe the way Saudi Arabia is fighting that war, but it was asked by what everyone considered, you know, at least the UN considered the legitimate government of Yemen, asked for the Saudi help. So maybe the Saudis are being very bad. I haven't looked too closely in the last year or two at that war, but they were at least asked in. So you have that, and of course the big elephant in the room is what China is going to do, particularly with with Taiwan right now, and we may get to some more of that looking in some more detail. So that's what I mean is, what does this mean? And this is going on. But now let's take a look at the situation going on in Ukraine. This is Defense Intelligence. These are published by, this infographic here is published on Twitter by a blue checkmark account, that, because I'm just trying to give you my sources of information so you can judge what I'm talking about based upon the sources that I'm using. Because obviously I'm not, I'll just let you know, I'm in California, I'm not in Ukraine, so it's not eyewitness information anywhere here. this that is an account, as a corporate media account, is what it's called, for the British Military of Defense. So they're pretty close nation-wise to the conflict, and it's obviously in English. So, and this is from what they're publishing as open intelligence, based upon, it can be misinformation, because if you go to their Twitter account, they have sort of stand with Ukraine kind of stuff. So they are obviously pro one side over the other. So they may be. Oh, and let me say, I guess in a way I'm part of it here, but there are multiple levels of war going on. One of them is an info war, an information warfare going on, and an influence warfare going on. Don't know whether that would be fourth generational, fifth generational war, however it's sort of spelled out by its definitions. Influence war and information war are highly related to each other. One, informational warfare, is controlling what information is known. Again, I know many people like Martin and Arno and ZZ know me from looking at military history along, but if you're new watching this, I like to show examples. There was an Italian frogman attack into the port of Alexandria, into Alexandria Harbor during World War II. The Italians, for all their patheticism of many military fighting abilities, actually had probably, towards the end of the war, particularly the Americans were probably getting better, but early war, they were the best naval commandos probably in the world. They had, sort of torpedoes, human riding, not suicide torpedoes, but slow torpedoes to power themselves into harbors and all kinds of things like that. And they were well trained, very good. They used some of those to get into, I think they used those, but they got into Alexandria's harbor. They planted some limpet mines, I forget, on the one big British battleship sitting in Alexandria harbor, and basically all of the Italian, frogmen were either killed or captured. Several of them were captured. Maybe some got out. Well, there was a little bit of some booms going off at night and some gunfire, and, the people of Alexandria, got up in the morning, looked around, and everything seemed perfectly normal. The battleship was still sitting there. British flag flying off of it, like it's with the flag, because they moved the flag for import, sitting there. It's just sitting there. Everything's just fine. Oh, okay. The report goes out. They're winning. Hello, Philip Halian. They're definitely winning the information warfare in the West. Wasn't that the Queen Elizabeth? Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, I have tendency to just pull these off from memory, so I don't remember HMS Queen Elizabeth. I'm not sure which battleship that was, Martin. But so apparently the Frogman attack was unsuccessful. Well, the British kept this whole thing going on. They had sunk the battleship. The battleship was sunk. It was just that there was, I don't know, at low tide, 5-10 feet, so 2 to 6 meters of water below the ship, so it just settled to the bottom of the harbor. It worked, but they kept up the pretense that ship, now it was still, the guns could still move around. You could still, if there was an air raid, they could still shoot anti-aircraft guns up into the air. But it was sunk to the bottom of the harbor because, there was enough holes poked along the side that it went to the bottom. The British, for a long time, kept up the pretense that ship was ready, with the rest of the fleet that was around, was ready to sail out and intercept any Italian fleet that comes nearby. So they kept up the informational warfare that this ship was still in proper service. That was an entire bluff. Yeah, if an Italian fleet came close enough to it, they could shoot the main guns at it, no problem. But it couldn't go anywhere because it had holes inside. And they didn't even want to start the sort of patching up recovery operation at that time, because it would let everybody know that the ship was non-functional. And this was before, at least before, I don't know if America was in the war yet at the date, but it was before the Americans had shown up with fleets and ships into the Mediterranean. So it was just part of a bluff, if you will. Hello, Extreme Finger, how you doing? So that's part of the information warfare, is what's going on, is create. And again, everyone who knows me knows that I have this saying: warfare is a political act. Politics is perception. So part of warfare, and who is winning and who is losing the war, and which goes into play the flag guessing game. Hello, Irish. What is that? Albania? It's just a really small little thing for me, but yeah. A little, looks to me like a red flag with a little dot on it, black dot, but I'm guessing Albania. So who's winning and who's losing the war is a perception thing. It can affect the morale of the soldiers. Are they fighting hard? Are they hardly fighting? It affects the political support for the government. It affects a lot of stuff going on. So that, so there's information, and then there's influence. Influence is like the morale of the soldiers, the morale of the home front, all of that stuff. So the informational warfare and the influence warfare are tied to each other, most assuredly. But they are two different things and have two different capabilities. So we will be looking at some photos and some film today, video footage. And yeah, those photos and film, to the best of my knowledge, well, some are edited, the videos, but those are real events. But what do they mean? We'll try to interpret them. And so I don't know that flag, Irish. That is an odd flag to me. I don't know if it's a raid on Alexander. Yeah. Thank you, Arno, for posting the link. And it was in Alexandria Harbor, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't, because I didn't look this up beforehand. Thanks, Arno, for publishing the link. But I do know the basic story of it, and it's pertinent to know, if, say, the radar defense element for Kiev is destroyed in a Russian rocket attack, Ukraine government may not want the Russians to know that, so they pretend that it's still going, or they may not destroy it, but the Ukrainian government may want the Russians to believe it's destroyed, so they stop trying to attack it. So they give out different disinformation, and being able to, and then when they through other radar sources see a large footprint of incoming attack aircraft, turn it on and shoot them all down out of the sky. So yes, I am definitely hello, Mr. Anderson, how you doing? Good to hear you're doing fine. You just got back from, okay, well, I hope you recover from work, Extreme Finger. So, please, everything that I'm saying here, I'm trying to back up with my sources. So it's not me saying that this is true. It's we're looking at the source here. And hello, Eric. Good to have you here, my friend. So this is from March 11th, so yesterday, again from the British Intelligence, the British Ministry of Defense Intelligence statements. So they obviously have their intelligence. They again may be in on, because they're definitely pro in their Twitter website, are unabashedly pro Ukrainian. So they themselves may be willing to give us disinformation for the goals that they're pursuing. So keep all of that in mind. Hey, Wargate, how you doing? Should have known that flag. Oh, what was the flag? I didn't see. I guess is I don't know. Yeah, I don't know Irish. What that second flag you posted? Um, is okay. So yesterday, it remains highly unlikely, and I got even more updates from this, but highly unlikely that Russia has successfully achieved its objectives outlined in its pre-invasion plan. Okay, so that's an interesting statement. That's a and it's they believe that the goals have not been met. This is sort of a new, unless they have communications, and we'll look at one article that is coming up that's very interesting that not very many people have looked at, and so it's another British article we'll be looking at a bit. So stay around or come back later if you need to. Sierra Leone, I can't believe I had looked it up. Yeah, I wouldn't picture right now Sierra Leone's flag. So a shooting down Russian cruise and ballistic missiles, reasonably well aircraft too. Very possibly. So maybe Britain had, has hacked some Russian communication, and people are bitching and moaning, saying you were supposed to be at that objective 5 days ago. So, that very well may have solid information behind it, or it just may be an opinion. I don't know. Ground forces continue to make limited progress. Logistical issues, and we will look at that, that have hampered the Russian advance persist, as does strong Ukrainian resistance. Okay. Russia is likely seeking to reset and reposture its forces for renewed offensive activity in the coming days. This will probably include operations against the capital, Kiev. And I'm going to keep pronouncing Kiev because that's just the name that I've learned over the years, and not going to try to pronounce it in other ways. Now, here we go. This is today's, just a couple, 3 hours old at the time of making this. Let's see, not just most of what Russia's. We'll look at some of the Russian equipment war gay. So this is at the time of the time I'm live. This is just was posted a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours ago, again from the same source. Fighting northwest of Kiev continues with the bulk of Russian ground forces around 25 kilometers from the city center. Okay, that's probably observable from satellite information, so that's probably true. Elements of large Russian column north of Kiev have dispersed. Interesting. This is likely to support Russian attempts to encircle the city. It could also be an attempt by Russia to reduce its vulnerability to Ukrainian counterattacks, which have taken a significant toll on Russian forces. I'm sure it is significant. And we will look at some video footage of at least one of the attacks and analyze it a bit, at least from mine. And I would love, of course, those watching. Or later, you can also post your comments later, what you think of my analysis of what some of the video we're going to be looking at a bit, and what it means. And beyond Kiev, cities of Kharkov, and again, I'm sort of using the older style names for some of these. Chernihiv or Chiev, I don't know, Sumy and Mariupol remain encircled and continue to suffer heavily Russian shelling. Okay, those are all probably true and correct. Now, this is from this map is from the same source, is actually slightly newer, posting as what is going on in Ukraine. So we have Kiev. They're not assessing it as being encircled yet, but Mariupol is. That's sort of the main city on there. Kharkov, they believe, is, and Sumy, Chernobyl, and Kiev. Okay, and sometimes some of these names, and this is, will have different spellings because they are translating from the Cyrillic alphabet into the Latin alphabet, and sometimes that will vary in how you spell, how you translate the spelling. So and obvious strike location since the start of the invasion. So a lot of these targets in the back here were struck like day one and maybe not struck since. So that tells you what is there. But there's another map that I found that I like much better than this to sort of tell you what's going on. It's this map here. See, look at the difference between these two maps here. Sort of move things over to the side. Now, look at that. I think this map is more correct. And what's the difference here? Well, here, this is all turned, pink or whatever we're calling it. I guess that'd be pink. Where here is, this is all pink because they control it. And this is all pink over here. This is the Donbass region. But this is the invasion. And I think this is correct. Yeah, if you were to shade in all these areas, you would come up with sort of this kind of map here. But I think the invasion looks like this. Now, I'm not absolutely sure. This is a map has been from relevant, reliable, open source reporting. Okay, so, this we're not going to, this is 100% accurate. But this is probably the territory, to some degree, is what is controlled by Russia. Okay, so basically what is happening, they're coming in and driving along the roads. And I've read a report that, okay, one thing I want to address here, and we will talk about it, I don't know, is I've got this from several people. Oh, there's a ceasefire and the Russians are shelling some hospital. And there was a ceasefire on, the Russians are just being beastly. Well, okay, the Russians are being beastly. I'm not going to argue that point. Okay, point number one, according to one analysis, is more than half of the brigade, quote-unquote, brigade elements that have invaded Ukraine did not have, as part of, they're supposed to have in the brigade, I don't think it was in another YouTube video, but the graphic was, I didn't do a screen cap, I probably should have. Did not have their signals unit with them, or did not have a signals unit. So these brigade-size elements, or they're elements larger than a company, but we're going to call them brigade size for the moment, do not have a signals element in it. So either that unit, now, not that the tanks don't have radios within them, but the radios in the tank can't necessarily talk to higher up headquarters. So they didn't have signals, the signals unit with them, or either with them or just didn't have it. And so either those units are moving along a preset of orders, drive from here to here on these dates, attack this position at this date. So they're following a pre-programmed path of advance, or they were talking to the unit next to them, another brigade next to them, and getting their information via that signals unit, talking out, as the brigade moves into Ukraine, the higher up commands talking to it, or talking to a friendly unit, or they're not talking. They can maybe communicate within the unit, but and maybe communicate if there's a unit close enough to them, they can communicate with that, but they can't communicate on a strategical sense because they did not have their communications unit. So they may not even know, a brigade may not even know there was a ceasefire. And we will take a look at some artillery in operation. I don't know how accurate their artillery is. I don't know how accurately their information warfare is to know if where the rounds that are landing, because they may, on a building next to the hospital, not the hospital, but maybe distinctly next to it, somebody sees some sort of rocket, because whether it's an anti-aircraft or an anti-tank rocket, fire, and then you have a backblast and there's a big cloud, and then they order an artillery strike based on maps at what they think is the right building on the map. They may miss, you look at the building and you look at the map may be out of date, and so you think it's the second building in, but they built a new building, so the second building in is now the hospital and not the location that was being shot from, or whatever. and not everything's up to date, or even they just misidentify the situation, and the artillery strikes a hospital. So doesn't make it okay what they're doing, because it's wrong to invade Ukraine. But these propaganda and informational warfare that I talked about earlier, some of these bad actions that the Ukraine is showing up I'm not defending them, I'm just saying they may not be deliberate bad actions. So you have the idea that a lot of the units that are coming in do not have communications to higher commands, as well as the informational warfare element is you have like the Azov brigade, the Nazi brigade we call them. I don't like using the term neo. It's just they're the Ukrainian Nazi brigade. Probably the assessment is they probably don't answer to the Kiev government. Kiev government gives them weapons, because they've been fighting in the Donbass, and they're probably one of the better military militia units out there, but they may not be responding. So when the Kiev government, and Russia has been trying to knock out Kiev communications, may not be able to or communicate well to them, or they may not pay attention to it, that there is a ceasefire when a few of their guys can sneak up and kill a few tanks and get back, that the Russian attack may not, the first breaking of the ceasefire is a local Ukrainian unit not either knowing or caring about what the Kiev government says or does, and that the Russians may be just responding to a Ukrainian breaking of a ceasefire. So don't get all worked up over breakings of ceasefire. Hey Crunchy, this isn't a mod. We're not playing a game. We're doing a chat on what is going on with the world. Colonel was outside command tank and hit on the first barrage. Okay. The modern tanks come without modern comm systems. I don't know where that. Yeah. Okay. Pretty clear. Most Russian tanks don't have radios. If they did, okay. Well, now see, a radio in the tank nowadays, I would presume is standard. But the range in which it can communicate may not be very far. So I don't know. I think we didn't know about the civilian corridor. Is Russia co-op for yeah, I don't know. I just don't know, because I don't trust Ukraine on Steam. We're not on Steam right now. I don't trust. I think the Ukrainian government will say whatever it can to get sympathy and support from the West, to get the West to take whatever actions, like giving them jets, or trying to, they would love to have NATO give them a no-fly zone, NATO directly enter the war. I don't trust what the Ukrainians are saying. I just don't. It doesn't mean I'm against them. This isn't anybody watching say, oh, well, you believe Russian propaganda. No, I'm just saying both sides are using propaganda. I don't necessarily trust. Yeah, this is real world, Crunchy. Unfortunately, this is real world war. It almost sounds like a world war, but no, this is real world war. Yes. So, unfortunately. So, again, from one of the descriptions is, a Russian brigade is moving, or brigades, but are moving along a road, are coming to like a crossroad, leaving a detachment at that crossroad, which could also be a village or a town there of some sort, and maybe splitting the force up to go along both roads and sort of doing this. And so they've sort of been not maintaining full control along. We'll get to some of the stuff here. I hope this is entertaining and informative. Hello, AZ Hines. Good to have you here, my friend. Nanas, the beard. Exactly, both sides misinformation. Absolutely. And although I'm generally on the side of the Ukraine, I call it by the old name often, I'm still acknowledging that they're doing informational warfare. So don't take this as just because I might believe a particular statement. You know, a Russian spokesman may come out and say it's noon right now, and it may be noon at that time. So it doesn't mean everything Russia says is wrong, but they're also in the war, and it doesn't mean I have sympathy for them. I'm just trying to evaluate all the information that I getting in what's going on. So again, because people are coming in late, this isn't sympathy for Russia. This is just acknowledging that everybody is lying in this. The U.S. government, just to be clear, the U.S. government is lying about what is going on in here. I know a lot of people that watch, yay for the U.S. government, but the U.S. government said that there was no biolabs in Ukraine. A U.S. government official, I think it was Victoria Nuland, under oath to Congress, said there was biolabs in the Ukraine, or in Ukraine. There was biolabs in Ukraine. Now, some debunker fact checkers, I don't trust the fact checkers anymore either. Oh, there are no Russian, or there are no U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. No one said there was U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Said there's biolabs in Ukraine. Or there are no bioweapons labs in Ukraine. No one directly has said in the U.S. government that there was bioweapons labs in the Ukraine. What they have said under oath, and then they've sort of retracted it by a different person not under oath, very key that there by the spokeswoman for the White House, retracted the statement, but they're saying that, but what they, is there's no U.S. biolabs, and maybe there's no biolabs, but what it probably is, again, I don't know for sure, because they did say under oath that there were biolabs in Ukraine. And now what biolabs are? They may be looking at anthrax, dealing with anthrax in animals, and trying to study it and understand it. Might not be anything designed around weapons of war, but there may be U.S. funded through third-party corporations. The U.S. government gives money to a corporation that then funds a biolab in Ukraine. So, it may not be at a U.S. biolab, but it still may get money from the U.S. government. So the U.S. government has made contradictory statements. Some of them are under oath to the Congress. So the U.S. government, because both statements can't be true at times, they've contradicted themselves. So the U.S. government is lying. So don't trust the U.S. government just because it's U.S. government. John lined up and doing papers. Well, very good, AZ. Glad you're getting a job, hopefully. And the response attack was chaotic. Okay, yes. No clear communications was happening yet. So just saying everything here is open to interpretation, and understand that I'm trying to give you the best evaluation I can. So these forces have been coming in, securing key points, moving on, securing key points, moving on. Well, this is a great size of territory. I don't think they have control over, and we'll look at some more evidence, control over much of the area. Now, they may be denying these roads effectively to the Ukrainians resupplying things like into Kiev, that this is evaluating that Kharkov is isolated here according to this recent map here, assessed and circled. So you may not be able to fly in an airplane with NLAW missiles or drive a truck with NLAW missiles to resupply Kharkov. So it may be functionally from standard road use unable to do that. Now you may be able to get the NLAWs or other missiles. We may take a look at some of the missiles later in this if people are still interested at that point. Get them nearby, and then at night, guys with four NLAWs on their backs, hiking them in through a secure, a overland, not over roads, but overland sort of route into the city. So it may be encircled, but I doubt most of these encirclements are such, just because looking at my understandings of history and cities that, whether the U.S., like Fallujah, tried to encircle, that there were still, while some of these cities were encircled, there were still people getting in and out of the cities if they used some sort of stealth. So these are maybe generally encircled, but not tightly encircled. And I don't know from city to city, and I don't know these cities well enough. But so this is what I think is the situation in essence, is that there are tendrils of control, and these tendrils of control might be, and notice also this very recent map of today, there were other ones that were assessing that this area here, that the Russians had come down into here. And so, because a big chunk of the Ukrainian National Army had been stationed here, in my understanding, and that it was encircled. Well, if this, or this map, which is also March 11th, is reasonably correct, well, this area is not encircled. Not at all. And if these road maps or rail maps are generally functional, they very well can be moving in supplies. And these forces that are here may be very much withdrawing back behind the Dnieper River right now. But okay, and we'll get to, here's a point. Oh, very good to hear, Arna. Who is winning this war? That would be a good question to ask. Who is winning the war? I don't know, but here is my perception. Like the statement says, Russia does not appear to have achieved their goals of the invasion. Invaded Ukraine, and it's real. Oh, yep, Crunchy's playing. Well, this is actually the Russians invading, but Soviets are gone. Trying to rebuild an empire, but not a Soviet empire, or whatever. But and what are the war aims? And that's also, you need to look at who's winning and losing the war. What are Russian war aims? What are Ukrainian war aims? Well, I can, with some well-defined accuracy, I believe, I can state the Ukrainian war aims: to secure the territorial integrity of the internationally recognized borders of the Ukraine, however you want to say it. Okay, that would be the war aim of Ukraine. Keep its borders, secure its borders. I actually believe its borders maybe should be adjusted. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know who's living down in here. Should this go to Romania? I actually think Moldavia, they sort of use a Romanian flag. Probably Moldavia should join you, the rest of Romania. The one thing, and I don't know, and I don't know if anybody can give me a good, clear reason why. When I look on Wikipedia, of course, Romania is overwhelmingly Catholic, but Moldavia, who the people speak, overwhelmingly speak Romanian, or Moldavian, a dialect, sub-dialect, maybe, if you will, of Romanian, but they speak basically a Romanian-based language. They're overwhelmingly Orthodox. So I just don't know why that is, and maybe that would be enough of a reason that it should be precious metals are winning this war. I don't, as in that they're going up. Yeah, it was part of, absolutely. I mean, it was this river basically here. Whatever this Dniester River, whatever this river going along, was the border with the Soviet Union at one time. So absolutely, it was part of it. But just mere fact that it was once part of it doesn't necessarily, because, hey, this was once part of Russia. Now I'm not talking, the Russian Empire. I'm not talking about the Soviet Union. This was once part of Russia. So does that mean Ukraine belongs to Russia? No. there's more gone into this, so I don't know. I think, and you could convince me, change my mind. You can change my mind, and that Moldavia should be independent. Maybe. Maybe this territory should be, maybe it's nowadays mostly populated by Ukrainians, so maybe it should stay Ukrainian as opposed to be transferred over to Romania. I don't know. I would say Transnistria should probably, it's a Russian pocket state that's entirely supported by Russia since the end of the Cold War, which is sort of considered in Moldavia, but a sort of a breakaway state that's there. Maybe that should go over to Ukraine. I don't know. Live here? Should some of this go back to either Slovakia or to Poland? I don't know. Just because this was sort of the borders at the, end of Cold War does not necessarily mean that they should be the borders today, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be either. I'm not saying it's got to change. It's just, well, they do speak a slightly different language, Azads, and they've been treated entirely very badly by Russians for a long time. It's sort of like saying Canada are just Northern Americans. And they are. And they're refugees from the Civil War aspect of the American War of Independence, of the American Revolution. And most, Canada tripled its population after the end of the, not during, but after the end of the American War of Independence, when all of the loyalists fled and most of them went up to Canada. So Canadians defined themselves as not Americans. So Ukrainians may define themselves because of the Holodomor and other reasons as not Russians. So that may very well. I believe you're mistaken on Romania's demographics. Sources say Romania is. I thought Romania was mostly Catholic. And Zizi, I very well could be wrong on that. Thank you. Sources say, well, then I see even less of a reason if they're both Orthodox. I don't see a reason, because they both speak basically the same language. I understand why Moldavia, because the situation as happening with Ukraine, small countries, and we can look at Georgia, way down here off this map, but on this map, small countries live or exist at the sufferance of its neighbors, meaning only because its neighbors allow them to, where countries large enough, strong enough, can militarily have the ability to say, no, we exist because we say we exist. Romania is 85. Okay, only Latin country which is Orthodox. Okay, well that could be, okay, Azads, maybe I was thinking the language more so than the religion there. Thank you, Azads, as well. Soviet Winter War. Soviets lost great numbers a minute. Yep, absolutely they did. Moldavia has historically always been an independent, not either Slovakia or Transylvania for a lot of its early history. To a point where with Romania, and you can look at a lot of Romania was at one point part, this sort of mountain area here was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it's sort of settling on what these borders as the retreat of the Ottoman Empire. So yeah, I'm not strongly saying they should or shouldn't exist as an independent country, but I am saying that a small country will have a much harder defensive long-term situation, and collectively, if they can settle whatever differences, if they need a federal system, it would probably secure Moldavia. If Moldavia doesn't want to, at some near or midterm future, become part of a new Russian empire, they may want to join Romania. If you can get everybody to agree that Moldavia is part of Romania, it is more likely to not become part of Russia in the future, I guess is my point. And if they have a close enough ethnicity situation so that they're speaking, the same languages, they have many same cultural practices, maybe there's good reason for them to basically, I know Azads, Canada is to a degree a U.S. dominion. but they define themselves as not American, as to use some of their terms, basically. Small countries on the borders of largest countries aren't fully sovereign. That's what Russia. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Ukraine, very much in a way. So, again, get back to who's winning this war. Well, like I say, Ukraine is its war objectives is to maintain its borders. Obviously, it's failed in the Donbass already. It's already failed in Crimea. It's failed in that. What are the Russian objectives? Well, I think in sort of super success world, sort of the ideal outcome, yeah, Putin would like to reabsorb all of this into the Russian Federation. But he may realize that is, and even before the invasion, he may realize that is too big of a bite to digest at this moment for Russia. He may realize that. I think it may be too big of a bite to digest. So what do I currently, and my mind has changed at different times on this, as to what I think the war goals change, but what the original war goals were. I think the original war goal was to, and since the biggest part of the invasion seems to be from the north up here, is from what I can tell, especially if you can sort of include this area here, but definitely the drive towards Kiev. It seems to be regime change in Kiev, because I don't think this big part, this invasion, it's not. They came across Belarus. They could have obviously been pushing into this area, but they don't seem to have been. Belarus, I don't think that we have they were sort of stating that they were going to enter the war. I don't know if that's really come to pass as any significant amounts. So it does not seem that they're moving into this part of Ukraine. So I don't think it's necessarily to take over all of Ukraine. I think it's to regime change in Ukraine, generally speaking. And I think it's sort of south and sort of east of this line, maybe Kharkov, I don't know which side, but this part, all this over in here and down here, to get annexed either directly or become an actual, stated puppet state of one sort, or, one of the subdivisions, sort of like Belarus is sort of a subdivision of Russia, in fact. It's a puppet state, in my opinion. Belarus and some of the other stands in the east are puppet states of Russia. So they have a certain local autonomy, but they're under Russian control. So this territory either fully or partially integrated directly into Russia, and have the Ukrainian government sign a treaty that it recognizes this. I think that is their war goal. Okay, so they may get that. They may get a regime change. They may get some of the territory. Now, we have to look at, and we'll look at some of the fighting very quickly here, but and analyze some of it. Well, Russia has not occupied all this territory. Hasn't been able to take Mariupol, as far as we can tell. Has not been able to take Kharkov, which are two major cities. They have, again, sort of a blob, and some of the early maps I still have sort of here, showed that a lot of Ukrainian normal National Army units were in this area. It does not seem like they pushed too hard against them. So again, I don't know if these forces are trying desperately to hold the Russian back, or are they trying to withdraw on the other side of the Dnieper. I don't know. I would be trying to withdraw a lot of the forces the other side of the Dnieper, but that's just me. Hold what you can, kind of thing, because if you can hold the Dnieper line, that's holding what you can. And what we're also seeing is a lot of asymmetrical warfare. And so is not tank battalions necessarily fighting tank battalions. It's some small group of Ukrainian forces, I want to say it that way because it may be local militia or maybe National Army or whatever, ambushing Russian columns as they're moving around, ambushing Russian outposts as they're as they're trying to occupy places, attacking them. And so I would think that this sort of, particularly east of the Dnieper area here, I would be trying to do asymmetric warfare and not try to do conventional warfare, try to hold key locations with whole territory. So let them sort of probe into this area, but turn it into a guerrilla warfare fighting in that area. Hello, Ari. Russians have been holding back for the last few days. They're likely preparing to build up. Well, I'll be talking about that in just a moment. That's what I've gathered. Yes, I'll be getting to some look at that in more detail. So I'm just analyzing who's winning. So what does winning and what does losing look like? Sort of going over that. So can Ukraine win this war? Abso-fucking-lutely. But it may be after Kiev is fully occupied, maybe after Kharkov is fully occupied, maybe after a lot of this stuff is occupied and they're sitting there, and 5 years from now, Russian forces will be withdrawing. That may be how, meaning that there's like 5-year guerrilla warfare. Because, and we'll look at some of the stuff, it does not seem the Russian people, it does, and there are hardcore people, it does not seem the Russian people, it does not seem want to die for this, or want to continue fight hard for this. It does not seem the Russian soldier wants to fight hard and die for the Ukraine. The Russian soldiers that are fighting here might fight desperately for what they consider their home territory, like the Ukrainians are fighting, but they don't seem to be fighting desperately for an invasion of Ukraine. And it seems the Russian elites, although they support Putin because Putin has been keeping Russia stable and has been allowing them to steal a lot from everybody, because Russia is a kleptocracy, basically, as one person described it years ago. You will be, if you live in Russia, subject to crime, including by the police. Or paying the police to protect you, kind of a thing, and they may protect you from criminals, but you need to pay them, or they'll give you parking tickets just because they want to give you parking tickets, even though you're parked legally, or they'll pull you over just, everybody is subject. It's a kleptocracy. Russia's a kleptocracy, government by criminals. Hello, medieval city. Problem with retreating from Donbass is that mostly flat land, so they would be attacked by air. I don't know how well the Russian air can operate at night. I don't know. And it appears that guerrilla warfare in open plains, AZADs for about 4 years, and there's lots of forests in Ukraine. For about 4 years after World War II, there was an active Ukrainian guerrilla warfare going on that, of course, Stalin wanted to keep hush-hush. But yeah, hello, Starstreak. They're giving Starstreak man pads. Yes, I did hear that, Starstreak. I do see the irony of your thing, your comment there in your name, and I know Starstreak as well. But so yeah, there for about 4 years after the end of World War II, there was an active guerrilla resistance to Soviet occupation of Ukraine by various forces after World War II. So can't have been, no, well, it wasn't successful, but now, okay, see, here's the difference. Here's the thing, in my opinion, is Russia would win an insurgency warfare if the supply of arms and munitions dry up to the Ukrainians. Okay? So, during the Cold War, Russia occupied Poland, Slovakia, or Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. So, and there was no ability to bring them in via the sea. So the Ukrainians were, after World War II, were isolated from the West, being able to send in munitions and weapons to keep the guerrilla warfare going geographically. That is not the case now. They can bring in weapons in through Poland, is actively allowing weapons to come in across its border. I don't know if Hungary or Romania or Moldavia is actively allowing, or Slovakia is actively allowing weapons to cross its border, allowing potentially, Ukrainian military forces to come into their country to, soldiers showing up in the country, getting keys to a truck and driving the truck back across the border. If they give a secure base for refugees, including retreating soldiers, to come back in some of these territories, and then allow those refugees to return home with guns and ammunition, that would be a remarkably different situation than how it was at the end of World War II, in which there was absolutely none of that. The east-west highways in Ukraine, but also there is the Holodomor. Well, absolutely. And that is why the Holodomor is why I think Ukraine will fight so hard. And the Starstreak system is a man-portable system, but it's sort of like a mountain artillery piece, in that it sort of has to be broken down into multiple sections, or it can be mounted on vehicles, because they also mount them on light armored fighting vehicles in Britain. The Starstreak missile. Starstreak missile is a combination anti-air and anti tank missile. It can do both. It fires a missile that will go out and has 3 darts that will go into either an aircraft or a tank and then explode. So it's a high velocity. It's where the Stinger is a proximity weapon, or whatever. You make contact or close proximity, and then it detonates and shoots a bunch of fragments. Where the Starstreak is meant to go in with its penetrating rod, hit, penetrate, and then explode, if I'm not mistaken. So Starstreak is a little bit different setup. And so you could easily put them on the back of pickup trucks, to have them operating, or you can, man pad them, but they normally take a few moments to set them up. They're not just quick fire from the shoulder, but they don't take a long time to set up. So if we see the Western world to continue to allow arms to flow into it, it's like one of the major, or several of the major ammunition manufacturers in the U.S., which are still having trouble catching up to the ammunition demand in America, has stated that they will send 1 million rounds of ammunition. I'm guessing 7.62 by 39 ammunition, sending 1 million, or donating 1 million rounds of ammunition that they're sending to Ukraine, that they're going to manufacture and send. I don't know if any of it's made it there yet, but this is not a covert op like it was in Afghanistan. So, giving aid to the Soviets initially, at least. This is a very open operation. So if they continue to get supplies, and if there's the will of the Ukrainian people, I think, because you did mention the Holodomor situation. Well, the population can evacuate. And I know there's like 44 million of them. A large portion of them can evacuate to the west while the fighters continue to fight. Hello, Nate. Did you hear about the alleged warplanes for Ukraine to retake the Donbass this spring? War plans, I mean. I know, I haven't heard about it. I don't know how effective they will be on an offensive. It's actually easier to do a Holodomor solution these days, because high yield mechanized farming just cut the supply of fertilizer fuel. Interesting. It's very similar to the Morgenthau plan. Yeah. I don't know what Russia's willing to do in that kind of situation, but realize the Holodomor only worked because there were Russian soldiers standing around the fields shooting any Ukrainians who went in and tried to steal food. If you split your forces up to occupy, Ukraine is a major net exporter of grains, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that does cause many people, probably mostly in Europe, a potential serious problem if, say, 10 or 20% of the food that you rely on every year is not going to be showing up because there's a war going on in Ukraine. So keep that in mind, people. But they may be able to, excuse me, just taking a drink here. They may be able to supply themselves relatively well, AZADs, with food. Um, so, because they won't be able to occupy every field to keep the Ukrainians out, because the Ukrainians will have guns and they will shoot the occupiers if they get into smaller formations. So I don't know that starvation, the Holodomor solution, would be practical on a Ukraine scale of operation. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't in some regions, and especially some of these cities, they may very well, that are encircled, cut off food coming in. It seems like the Russians are allowing the civilians to evacuate the cities. Seems like it. Not necessarily going to do a ceasefire to allow it necessarily, but if there's columns of civilians, they don't seem to be overly targeted by the Russians. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying an allegation from Russia is that they found plans which proceeded. I'm not. Well, even if they were going into the Donbass, so it was their territory. It was to extract grains and sell it for industrial materials. What I'm suggesting is the reduction of farm yields. Yeah, I know. From your farm, and yields would go down, but I don't know if that would still be able to support the population well enough. And of course, the West may send in food. Trust me, America could easily double its farm output. The U.S. government pays, including my uncle, who is not a farmer but owns farmland, money to not farm his land. He gets paid by the government to just let it sit there, and so he takes that money. Instead, he would, if it wasn't for the government paying him not to farm, he would just lease the farmland out to an actual farmer that has either nearby or contiguous farms. But he is not a farmer. He just inherited farmland and still owns it, but he is not a farmer, and this would allow others to farm it. But the U.S. government would rather not have extra food on the market, so they pay him not to farm his land. So he's cut the but it's interesting. I don't know. 70 minutes late geopolitical discussion. Well, I hope it's interesting. Fallow land, and they're leaving the farmland. It's in Kansas, so in America's breadbasket. So it might take a while, but we could up our food production here in the U.S. So again, we'll go back to this and then move on to another topic here as part of all of this. This is what I think the actual occupation more or less looks like. Key strategic points, but all these other areas within it, I don't think a lot of these people that living in the small towns have seen a Russian. If you're not on the invasion path, I don't think they've seen a Russian. So this allows for guerrilla activity. Okay, let's see what I wanted to look at. Yeah, this is good enough. Close this. I want to open this window. Here we go. Yes. Okay. Okay, this is just one of the simple things. This is MLRS firing from a multiple rocket launching system firing from a location out in the fields. Weapon systems like this, how well are they hitting their targets? What are their targets? And that is a key thing. Are their targets are just shelling a city? Or are they trying to shell a specific location? Let's go here. You can see over here this. is an attack back somewhere, I presume, going on here. And you see another explosion here. That's definitely not the MLRS system. This is like responding fire. There would be a church right there. And this is, again, this was the firing location down in here. And this is presumably drone footage. I don't know. I mean, this is not the most interesting stuff that I want to show you here, but I thought we would sort of start with that. We'll get into some more of the interesting stuff here. Okay, now, remember the picture with all of those threads moving into Ukraine, and Ari bringing up before the supply situation. And I want to go over this. And okay, so we've looked at the big picture here, plus the cause large human migration into Poland, etc. Yeah, there's AZADs. This is all bad, and the Russians can do a lot of bad damage to Ukraine. I'm not saying they can't. But what does winning look like? But we'll get to some of that more in detail. But we're looking at all this. This is a thread that will explain, and this is a fairly recent, explain poor Russian army maintenance practices based on photos of this Panzer S1 wheeled gun missile systems, right rear wheel tires are blown, and operational implications during mud season. So we can see here, tire wheel blown, it's immobilized. For the sins of being the new guy, this is explaining his background. I was a DCMA quality auditor in charge of U.S. Army's FMTV vehicle exercise program at a contractor manufacturing them from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. Then we got more new guys. So this is that. Okay, and turned over and moved once a month to military trucks need to be turned over and moved once a month for preventive maintenance reasons. Particular, you want to exercise the central tire air inflation system to see if the lines have leaks or had insects, vermin's nests blocking the systems. One of the biggest reasons for repositioning for Tacom logistics representatives was direct sunlight ages truck tires. Repositioning trucks in close parking prevents a lot of sun rotting and cycling the tire system. So basically they're saying the tires are getting old. When you leave the military truck tires in one place for months on end, the sidewalls get rotten, brittle, such using low pressure settings for any appreciable distance will cause the tires to fail catastrophically. If you're if you're just, you don't want to get into the nitty gritty, that's probably where we're going to head for the rest of this talk. You can leave, whether you're watching live or you're watching later. For want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, yes, absolutely, Star Streak. What was that? Richard III or something, I believe. Star Streak, if I'm not mistaken. Here you have all you need. I think the whole Ukrainian is going to be invaded by Republic. Sounds more like Putin's lies. Yes. Hey, IKB, good to have you here, my friend. So again, if this truck and these trucks are designed to have their tires like fully inflated when driving on roads or proper hard ground, but if you're going into snow or mud, they're designed to deflate, to spread out the weight distribution, to drive over that. But they're saying the tires using low pressure settings are catastrophically failing. Now look at the sidewalls after Ukrainians tried to drive the truck out of the mud. Right rear tire fell apart because it rips and being too big for the keep air in there. This is huge operational invocation. Okay, so there is photographic evidence. Russian cannot risk them off-road in Rasputina mud season, which I gather is around now, and in some of the things getting its defrosting. Here are 60-plus Russian army trucks crowded and parked in a raised road bed to avoid the fate of being mud bogged. as the one truck was in that thing, meaning great artillery targets, great ambush targets. Yeah, okay, talking Soviet bound for Russian army columns. This is the Finnish war. Looking at that now. So this supposedly, get back to some of what this. There's a map in real time of all the new borders between Ukraine and Russia. Okay, interesting. I think it's a Benjamin Franklin quote. Maybe, I don't know. I thought it was something to do with Richard III. Now, okay, so Russia is having a serious maintenance and supply problems, as far as I can tell. That is one, and it is also what the UK Ministry of Defense is saying, that it is having difficulty supplying its forces, say, 80 kilometers away from its border. One statement by somebody is, if your army can't fight at night because it doesn't have night vision equipment for every single soldier and every single tank kind of thing in its aircraft, if it can't fight at night, if it halts its operations at night, and it appears from what I understand the Russians primarily are operating it, stopping its operation at night, starting operation, if it can't fight at night, it is not a modern army. If it is not a 24-hour fighting source, and to the point that the U.S. actually got to where it preferred to move and fight at night. It was often fighting against Iraqi forces or against insurgent forces in Iraq or Afghanistan, unlike in Vietnam when the VC controlled the night and the Americans controlled the day with its air power and being able to see. America in Afghanistan, I particularly, controlled the night. It was more deadly and could move around and see and fight and communicate at night where the insurgents can't. Okay, so that's one element, is their night. The link I posted before. Richard III is my kingdom for a horse. Okay, Starstreak, probably. I'm just trying to, there. Okay, so that sort of tells you that they are having trouble. Now, there are supposedly reasonably good airlift abilities in Ukraine for supplies, but Russia has not been able to exclusively control air operations, not control the skies. And to sort of, so we can sort of laugh at the Russians here, as it says, laugh at all you want, but Russia's struggling to supply its own troops 80 miles from its border, while the U.S. can deliver fast food across the planet. So, again, to look at the U.S. fighting, I don't know whether they're loading this restaurant. This is a restaurant here. Whether they're loading this Burger King restaurant onto the aircraft or taking it off, I don't know. But it is sort of dusty, so I don't know if it's getting ready to come home or has made it home. But the U.S., right now, if it was going to go fight in Ukraine, not that everybody gets every soldier gets a burger every day, but the U.S. could deploy one and keep supplied one Burger King restaurant per division, plus probably a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh, and delivering the burgers and the chicken or whatever from America to it. The ability to supply that the America has shows off the stark differences in warfighting capabilities between the nations. So, hello, Charmandeer. I hope I'm getting that right. So just sort of as a bit of an aside, this shows the logistics difference. And the logistics war is a serious problem with Russia right now, as far as I can tell. And so you have to keep that in mind. It's not necessarily, it's being defeated by its own Rasputina that, helped save it from the German invasion. It is being hindered by that. Okay, I wanted to talk about this article here. Chaddock or whoever, sorry, I'm not remembering, tweeted this out. This is from a British article here, and I asked him how credible he thought this was. He's a former officer in the British Army and an author on World War II books, a historian. Just to give the guy I was talking to and who tweeted this out originally. And I asked him, how credible do you find this? And he says, and his reply back again was sort of, very interesting, no one else is picking this story up. So it may mean that this is untrue. I just, again, want to try to show you my forces. Yes, there are armored trains moving around. I've seen some of the video. We may get to some of that stuff. Take this story, and I'm just moving to turn off the heater right now. I'll be back in just a moment. Slight pause here. Back. So take this with all the grains of salt you feel necessary, because this could be, again, we talked earlier about the information warfare and the influence warfare. This all just may be disinformation. You should had no supply issues during World War II because these are trucks. Well, it had supply issues during World War II, but the Lend-Lease trucks definitely helped alleviate that considerably. Okay. According to this, Putin sacks 8 Russian generals in anger at slow progress in Ukraine invasion. So I'm not even sure he did sack these people. Again, like I said, this could be all disinformation, but we're going to look at this quickly here. This is from Metro UK, just for your sources if you want to look at it. Furious Vladimir Putin is said to have sacked 8 top generals in anger over slow pace of invasion. He blames them for seeding him with advice that led to a poor decision making in Ukraine. So according to this, now somebody maybe has leaked this information out, and even a Western intelligence sources maybe they used before the second invasion into Iraq, the U.S. basically was monitoring all like phone and telecommunication type stuff going on inside of Iraq before the invasion and during the invasion, and they were literally calling up Iraqi generals and say, hey, if you want to surrender your forces now, you just sort of park your tanks there and whatever, and we'll just note by you doing this, we won't attack you, we'll come in and occupy you if you or if you keep driving down that road, keep moving those tanks down that road. They were literally calling them, we will attack them. And then they kept going, and you see all the tanks on that road get obliterated. So I don't know how good the signals intelligence into Russia may be. So whether this is somebody and then somebody leaking it out who actually heard these things or not, I don't know, but it very well could be that. So according to this, he's blaming the decision for going in on these people that gave him poor information. Poor decision making led Russia to much higher casualties than expected, which has now been going on for 2 weeks at the time of this article. Moscow anticipated little resistance when it sent in its light forces back by airstrikes to seize current target. Capital never will. Well, it may. Security head. So removed. Again, they're quoting these sources. This is just a few days old. Some of the sources I've been using. Now the new ones have been appointed. We clearly understand what is happening in Russian Federation. I can say that they are desperate. Ukraine believes Russia has lost up to 12,000 men in a fortnight. It's 2 weeks to you Americans. European intelligence puts it between 6,000 and 9,000, and the U.S. lower still at 3,000. Yeah, there's a lot of disinformation going on, which proves accurate as almost certainly more than Putin anticipated. Huge Russian convoy advancing toward made little progress. Don't know how much. There was hires based on parents and grandparents being agents and removed from mainstream schools and education. That supposedly there's a big intelligence failure is what they're pointing to this, and they had been sort of telling Putin what he wanted to hear, is what this article is saying, and that they've fired people because things aren't going as anticipated. Well, I do believe it's true that things aren't going anticipated. I don't know if he's getting to the point of firing them. Okay, what is Michael Kola saying? You have to keep in consideration that Russia is avoiding bombs the Ukrainian cities and has used the Air Force because, well, he's destroyed major parts of some Ukrainian cities. I think they're worried about for bombing. Yeah, I think part of it is and the British, Ministry of Defense keeps saying that Russia has not secured the air over, the airspace over Ukraine. And partly I understand their statement to mean not that Ukrainians are flying lots of aircraft, is that they haven't suppressed, and we'll take a look at it, Ukrainian air defense systems enough to allow them to safely bomb. And they don't have good stealth to go in. So where the U.S. did massive air raids over Iraq and both Gulf Wars to suppress air defense systems starting out and then moving to other targets. So I wanted to just mention that about the okay, we can take a look at this. I think this will be interesting. I'm not going to play the sound just because I don't need copyright strikes or something on some of this stuff. I don't see the level of operations or the level of stealth that the Russians are using here. Okay, this is Russian unit firing artillery. Let me get this bigger. Oh, get a little audio so you can see it clearly. For some reason, this source is blurring out the artillery rounds. I don't know why. I don't understand why. Other than, and I'm going to speculate, is they don't want to show the markings on the artillery rounds. Maybe not to show how old they are. I just figured, these may be, these like 19, if you read the serial number or the product codes or whatever on the rounds, you might realize they're from like the 1960s or something, just old surplus stuff left over from the Cold War. And so this mobile artillery piece, you can see, is mostly, there's a guy inside of it, but mostly instead of loading and firing rapidly from mechanisms inside, they're using it as a positioned artillery piece, get it to their location. They got stacks up box of rounds, moving them, carrying them up, loading them in, shooting at a generally predetermined target, shelling a position. Not very, shoot and scoot. Modern artillery, at least I was taught when I was back in Army ROTC, Army Reserve Officer Training and other things, was to shoot and scoot. It was shoot an artillery barrage at somebody else and then move, because the enemy's radar is going to pick up where the trajectory of incoming rounds and plot them back to their source, and then they were going to do counter battery fire rapidly on your source, so you needed to shoot and then move to a new location and then get ready to shoot again. Why are they not doing that here? Well, I can tell you some reasons. One, they don't have good positioning systems, meaning determining where this exact artillery piece is located, and then trying to determine the exact location, and then determine the ballistics between them. If they're moving around a lot, they may not have GPS software to update their position changes. They may not have trucks and vehicles to quickly move around and resupply the ammo. They don't fear. We'll get to maybe some stuff. I think I have some of the stuff saved. Some location. Don't fear counter strikes, but they don't seem to be moving very fast. Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of the stuff, because they're using identified T, and I'm not great at identifying the difference between a T-72, a T-80, T-90, because, and partially because they've slapped so much reactive armor all over the things. If I get out my books, I could start trying to figure out what they are. But there has been identified, the T-80 did come in under the Soviet Union. The T-72s are obviously Cold War Soviet era tanks. So yeah, I don't know. Hello, Dmitry Melenkov, and no, I don't speak, but I'm guessing it's about Ukraine. Cyrillic, sorry, I don't. But that sort of gives you an idea of how the lack of rapidity of either firing the ammunition, because it appears from watching this, could be edited badly, that they are firing around, and while they're firing that round, they're getting ready and setting the fuses, because they may set it for airburst or other fuse settings, even impact fuses. They're setting the fuses and then carrying the round over to the gun, and then firing it again at an already predetermined location, a town, a section of city, whatever it is they're shooting at. But they're just slowly pounding away at that location, which is very odd, because I'll tell you what, if I was at that location, I would move. Why do you keep pounding it? Just pull back, get a bit out of the way. And if they're not targeting like a specific building, a specific, entrenchment, they're just randomly firing shells into a town, well then, are you effectively destroying the military defenses of that location, or are you just simply turning it to rubble? So it's interesting looking at that. So yeah. Okay, let's see. I've saved a bunch of links and whatnot. Okay, yes, I want to look at this one. Again, we're going to not be playing sound because I don't want a copyright strike on it. Gives us the tools and we'll finish the job, was a Winston Churchill quote during World War One. This is just basically Ukrainian propaganda. But they're just showing some stuff here from the war, and some that looked like it was maybe South Africa, from other wars as well. So again, some of this is real. Okay. Really, we can see here this supposedly, and I am not immediately identifying the white Z's, which I believe are just a vehicle recognition thing, not some political, it's becoming a political symbol, but so I'm not sure. Now this is obviously, this even could be that same truck that we were looking at about the wheels, and it very well may be, so they maybe decided to destroy it instead of, if they couldn't recover it. Very likely a downed Russian helicopter. One thing that I wonder about this, we should send aircraft into Ukraine. For either a no-fly zone or whatever. I don't know that the Russians, or the Ukrainians, I should say, the Ukrainians, with the surface-to-air missiles, the man portables, have good enough aircraft recognition capabilities to define a Ukrainian aircraft from a Russian aircraft, or an American aircraft from a Russian aircraft. So I wouldn't want to fly my forces over. This is also interesting, and I want to have some comments. Some people were sort of negatively commenting about this, but so I wouldn't want to be flying over Russia right now. Okay, again, turn the audio off. Sorry guys, just YouTube. Okay, the point of this was, look at the old equipment. This is a Ukrainian forces of some sort. Supposedly. These are Russian. These are Russian forces in the Donbass. but I wanted to look at these because these are Russians, Donbass separatist forces, supposedly. And this is just something that I find interesting here. We'll stop and look at some of these once I get a good photo of a couple of things. And it was sort of like, okay, here we go. It was sort of like, look, they're using leftover World War I equipment. This isn't very good. Rubble's good for building defenses. Absolutely, IKB. This, I believe, is a PTRD. PTRD 41 or whatever. I believe it is. Which is a 14.5 millimeter anti-tank rifle. Again, from World War I. Now, why would you still be using this? And you're sort of like, there's also Mosins here. Why would you be using this? And using old equipment. Well, one, Russia does not have the culture of having 50 caliber rifles. America, back in the 80s, late 80s, what was it, Barrett or somebody, I think, started making 50 caliber bolt action rifles. Big things. So things you can carry, one person carry, but you can't like shoulder fire. You use bipods. And, the anti-tank rifle went out of style during World War I and has since returned, and not so much as an anti-tank rifle, but as an anti-material rifle, and because it's not technically legal to shoot somebody with them. But you very well may want to use this old thing, and it's not junk. You may want to use it for several reasons. Even if you have a bunch of NLAWs or whatever the, RPG-7s and other more modern, RPG-7s are old, obviously, but some other more modern Russian man-portable things. Well, one, you may be in a building or a bunker that you don't have the back blast space for the gas to go out of your thing and not harm or even kill the shooter of it if you're in a tight confined area. You may want to use this. Two, because we can see, I'm mostly used to seeing a lot of the 50 cal rifles being shot, because sometimes in person, sometimes in videos. I live in the Southwest of America. They're often out in the desert, so there's lots of dust whenever you shoot them. But out here in the mud, there might not be any dust, and some powder smoke as it goes out, but in magnitude smaller than it could be, I think it's a 14.5, but it could be a 12.7 millimeter. I'm not sure. I'm not absolutely sure. Maybe you are, but I'm not. But, one, Russia is continuing using the 14.5 millimeter machine guns mounted on like the BTR-60 and other follow-on BTR-70s and whatnot. So they are using the 14.5 millimeter machine guns on vehicles. So the ammunition is plentiful. And if you're just wanting to shoot at lighter skinned vehicles and not have such a big, here I am when you shoot, and we'll take a look at some video footage of some people shooting, less of a 14, into an engine block of a truck or Jeep. You could absolutely IKB. I'd rather just machine gun it. A pure unarmored vehicle, but a thin, not a tank, but what we would normally call an APC or an infantry fighting vehicle, those types of vehicles, a 14.5 will probably penetrate it. So where a machine gun won't penetrate it. It depends. So something like this is man portable. It does not give away your position as well, or as much as a lot of the rocket firing ones. So there's not, just because they can't get newer stuff, this might actually be the best useful weapon for it. And as pointed out, like you can sort of see there, I think, but we'll go forward and look at it. That's an AK. Okay, here, yes. This is a Mosin with a scope. And most of the ones I've been seeing have been having scopes. So if you're in Russia, you probably don't have easy access to .308 ammunition or other Western calibers. It is, even though the Russians, yes, if you can get your hands on SVDs or other semi-auto sniper rifles, those might be decent sniper weapons, but you want to have a longer range shooting rifle, battle rifle type caliber. There's plenty of machine gun ammo. This isn't like a high-end sniper rifle, but still it's scoped. It's probably in nice shape. Probably the bore is in good shape. So it's probably reasonably accurate, and you want something more accurate than at long ranges. And you see this other guy here has another one here. So that you may want to use a bolt action weapon, even though you can get an AK-74 or Krinkov or whatever you want to call them. So you can get more modern weapons for sure, but having some, I think that's a different rifle there, but another scoped one. Can't tell if that one's scoped. So, and yes, they do have some sort of, I don't know the model of, looks like a single use. There's, I think, the trigger, and it folds out to the side or something. I don't know exactly, but single-use anti-tank rocket as well. But so they may be choosing to use these weapons because even though they're old, they're still effective on a modern battlefield. I think Putin decided to put on fire all the old Russian units. He had to avoid a full upgrade of his army, trying to elongate Ukrainians just using old stuff. I don't remember. 14. Well, yeah. Well, 14.5 is, like I say, is still very much a vehicle used. Okay, here we go. This is one of the things I wanted to look. Okay. We'll full screen this again. Shut the audio off. Okay. Let's analyze this. This is intercut with some other stills and or video footage, but here we have a Russian column. I believe that is a tank. I believe that is a tank. I believe this is a BMP type vehicle, 1, 2, or 3, or some follow-on type thing. I believe that is another BMP. I'm not sure what that is. That looks like a tank. So these are somewhat spread out, moving down the road here. Okay, they're, we call slow moving. So right here, they just fired and they hit. So they're this close. They're behind some trees. They're this close to it. This is like a gas station here for large trucks, it looks like. So just give you a size scale. 2 lanes, center wide. Okay, here, this whole thing. Can anybody tell me what is the first failure of this Russian column? I'm believing this is a Russian column. I'm believing this is a Ukrainian forces firing at. Can anybody define what is the first thing the Russians have done wrong here in a modern fighting war? Now, this may be also the thing that the Americans would be doing wrong, because the army has, in my opinion, failed, and I don't know if it's reevaluated its forces yet as well. But what is the first thing that is going on wrong here? Can anybody identify it? No cover? That may be a thing, but these are the Russians that are moving down the road, not the attacking forces. What is single file? Maybe. Nobody else is getting it yet. Tanks are spread out? No, that's not it. Okay. What are we looking at, people? What are we watching, people? Not what's in the frame. No infantry cover to protect the tanks from infantry ambush? No. What are we watching here? Not what's in the video. We're watching drone footage. And this is, I'm surely, Ukrainian drone footage. So the Ukrainians who were preparing, the Ukrainians knew that this column was coming. How did they know the column was coming? Maybe drone footage. These Ukrainians or some other Ukrainians are watching this live from the air. So they're not controlling their skies. Now, drones can be small. I understand that. They probably don't see the drone up here. But Russia did not take drones into account and is not moving with an anti-aircraft vehicle. They should have an anti-aircraft vehicle that with radar that picks up a drone and shoots the drone out of the sky. Ground forces, and I know the Americans are also, yes, no AA. So the Americans have become arrogant and have removed AA units from ground forces because they're used to the American forces clearing the skies of all the enemy aircraft. And I don't think this is satellite footage. I don't think this is airplane, a flying plane that's flying high and zooming in. I think this is roughly this high, whatever this height is. A drone is sitting up here, and the Russians did not spot it to realize that they were under enemy observation. So no radar, no AA, exactly. And so if you have radar, you should be able to spot at some of these. This apparently, because we're right above the road centered line here, we're not, unless there's some really tall bridge over this road, we're not off to one side or the other looking out of a building. This drone doesn't appear to be just peeking over, because if we were over to the side, the drone might be just hovering above the trees or something like that. This is one of the things I noticed about this video, and I don't think most people are catching it who need to analyze modern warfare. The U.S. Armed Forces, everything that's moving around like this, and in the future, whether it's armored, if it's the new Stryker wheeled vehicles that Rumsfeld wanted to convert all of our army over and get away from tanks and heavy Bradleys, or whether it's heavy Bradleys and tanks, whatever the force is that's moving around, you need to have immediate air cover to deny, and because they used them in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Taliban and ISIS and whatever, ISIL or whatever you want to call it, did use drones to observe the American forces. You need to have radar that will, because these are close by, so they'll be small targets, but they're close by, to have radar to pick them out of the skies, and then have little 30 caliber Gatling guns go and shoot it out of the sky. So if the drone is too small for AA, then there's also electronic countermeasures and jamming. Absolutely, IKB. There's also that, and you see some of that. And I don't know, I've definitely seen guys that are standing around like presidential security guard section. Someone was for France, photographed, and some were for like the U.S. at events, to have these guys with these weird shoulder things that are like jamming, that will probably set up and jam whatever it is, and it'll probably just plop to the ground, or that kind of thing. So you will no longer get the live feed to be jammed. So surface-to-air missile that could go after a drone, a light, cheap one, or an anti-air gun. The U.S. did make a bunch of them, but they pulled them from active service. Like a 20 millimeter gun, and realize here. You want to control drones is very difficult, but should be easy enough for Russians to have satellite or view of the place where the column must pass. Yeah, but okay, now realize, and you say picking the drone out of the sky and shooting it down. Realize the Americans around the major bases like Bagram Airfield and the huge complex there. The Americans, with their radar that they set up there, could pick up an incoming mortar round or an incoming rocket round as it's coming in, and shoot it out of the sky before it could land, and shoot one after the other, after the other, after the other. So if it's like a rippling barrage of them, just shoot them all out of the sky as they're coming in, because they took what had been the Navy's phalanx system, the CWIS system, and put them on the back of a big, tractor trailer truck situation, and towed them and can tow them around. So yeah, you can put one of those big things on every one of these columns, but the technology that America has can spot a rocket or a mortar round as it comes in and shoot it out of the sky before it can land, and get the targeting vector of, computerized targeting vector back where it was launched from, and counter battery fire can be immediately firing back, to the point that they would sort of remotely they would like set the rockets up or the mortar up, and maybe several barrels all at once, and get away from them and trigger them to be launched, because they knew the counter battery fire would be coming before they could get away from it. So even before the impact of these rounds coming in, they may be already launching counter battery fire. Now that's at like Bagram base, where they're protecting aircraft and expensive stuff. Not every FOB or forward operating base did they have that. But, you know, these little drones, they got battery packs in them. Those batteries will give off radar signatures. They're probably not some super stealthy thing. So modern armies need to have light anti-aircraft. Even if you're the U.S. Army and you believe the U.S. Air Force is going to sweep the sky of all, you know, enemy fighter planes and bombers and whatnot, you still need small local protection to keep the terrorists from watching and telling, or whoever it is, you know, we call our enemies terrorists at times, but telling you, get ready, they're coming, okay, fire, get ready, they're fire when you see them, and, you know, giving them warnings. So that is the first thing, is they're not controlling the airspace, and they're allowing the enemy presumably to know they're coming well in advance, because these guys probably weren't sitting here for 3 days and just waiting. But these guys also probably didn't walk here after this column started moving down this road. So they got here before the column got here, is my guess. Is they got here before the column got here, and they probably knew the column was coming from drones. Now they may be in more or less this position, but just looking way up that road and see, yeah, way up there, there's a bunch of vehicles coming. Get ready, and, you know, whoever, you know, Bob and Sam or whoever came over here and got in a position that they liked. It looks like there's some sort of structure here, there's some trees here, and get in a position they liked and get ready to ambush them, and they probably got word when it was good to ambush. So that's the first thing the Russians did wrong, was not control the airspace. Separation, well, you know, you could do a little better, but right now it's not too terrible from this attack. So they've hit that vehicle. Now we see this, but it also sort of looked like, I don't know what was right there or something, or that may be just a boost rocket and another, I don't know. So they've hit that. This is just a clip. Okay, now this is just video. This may be the gas station. This may be that gas station behind it. So this may be the wreckage of one of the vehicles from it. Maybe, just maybe. I don't know. And this may be too common of a gas station motif in the region, but this is cut in. Okay, so now we're back to this video. So this may be this gas station here. I don't know. Okay, so these guys are getting out of this vehicle. This is hit here, and we can see here some guys, the vehicle that's hit there, there's guys running away from it. Guys getting out of this vehicle. So this guy looks like, I don't know, he's like, almost looks like he's being dragged or something behind this and trying to hide. Some of these guys are running to get out. Others are sort of taking position. See, that guy's definitely crawling. Don't know what that guy's doing. This guy's over here, maybe dead. They may be being machine gunned down. I don't know. But see, this guy's scooching his way this way. So I don't know if he's just crawling and keeping low, or if he's been hit. Again, I don't know that this is related to that attack. Okay, so now over here, when we're looking, I didn't point out, but these guys are running to cover. I can tell you the Ukrainians are this was either very hasty or somewhat amateurish on their part. They don't have a good training on how to ambush the enemy here. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Because when I say this is, maybe these Ukrainian forces here just got into this region hours or moments before the Russians showed up, maybe, or they may be in their days and waiting for them to come. I don't know, but we see these guys sort of get abandoned. The vehicles are moving out of the way. I wish it wasn't cut, and there may be an uncut version, but I don't have it. And we can see what looks like over here. It looks like the Ukrainians are trying to retreat. Now there was some fire by forces up here at the in-law position. Okay, again, this is another incident entirely, I believe, or if it's related, it's not in frame here. Okay, so now we're looking back up the road. These two vehicles have moved to, because this is where the original firing position was. This is the vehicle that was originally hit, I believe. I think it's a tank. I think these are tanks. Sorry, my identification is not great here, where I think these are, APCs. Oh, Edmund, how you doing? So we see some reaction. So they are returning fire with 2 of the vehicles, putting suppressive fire, and you just want to shoot. I mean, if you can actually identify a target, great. But you just want to, and probably mostly with your machine guns on the vehicles or light caliber weapons, you just want to shoot because you want to put fire on these guys so they don't shoot these guys effectively. You know, you want to make these guys duck. That's one of the things you want to do. Okay, they just fired off. He fired off a main gun blast into here. Now, again, there could be some sort of target that I haven't identified over here, but I think this is misidentification of the target location. I think these vehicles, which were sort of back here and maybe moved up a bit when this fired, they've sort of identified the target as being over here, where I identify it as here, but I'm not sure. Again, there could be people I don't know, maybe somebody who's better at video analysis can identify it. Okay, and so this is up here. This is the incident. This is the original vehicle hit. Something's been cooking off in the back of it, whether it's a gas tank or something. Unlike War Thunder, gas tanks really do blow up and burn. Okay, again, I don't know what this is cut into. I don't know. Other footage. Okay, so these vehicles have now moved over here. I think this is a bit of a depression from the road, and they're now circling to sort of face their fronts to the expected enemy. The rest of the column has stopped out of the kill zone, but it is bunched up. That you're stopping out of the kill zone is good. Again, they look like they're firing here, but now maybe they see people running away back in here that I just don't identify. Okay, that's okay. Yes, well, I did sort of want to go back. I just sort of like that sort of shot. Okay. Two things here. 2 ways that I, as an armchair general, and I did have some training, but I've never been in a war. The Ukrainians, to me, did 2 things wrong. Or not 2 things, well, they should have dealt with this in one of 2 ways that they didn't. To me, this position here looks like it has reasonable cover. There's some sort of structure here. There's or concealment, maybe I should say. Some levels of concealment, meaning it's hard to see them. Cover and concealment are 2 different things. But what the problem is that there doesn't seem to be an escape route. Because, again, it was originally fired from here as far as I could tell. And that's sort of nice because, it gets a nice side shot on the vehicle coming here. And you sort of knew, and I believe that's towards the front of the column. One, they could have waited for more of the column to come by, but let's just say just a few of you, enough, somebody has a drone up flying, identifying, like I say, you can look up the road, but they may be able to look up a few more kilometers up the road, literally, to see these guys coming, and so they get into their position to fight. I think it would have been better to put the main attack over in here so that they could run away through the woods, run away through concealment at least. It might not stop a bunch of machine gun ammunition being fired at them, but would have allowed them to get out. The other way, and then you can see like over here is a building, if you had, and here's a building, if you had a building like this and you had a vehicle waiting and you knew, presumably these guys know the local terrain, that looks like a roadblock that somebody's put here before this attack. To me, it looks like a roadblock here. But would be a motor vehicle escape, would be another thing to go very quickly, have it behind some sort of level of cover. So I would not have, and again, I'm just looking at the terrain that I can see around here. This looks like, as Azad was saying, in flat plains. Well, there's a lot of trees out here to do good guerrilla warfare in. So you just need to shoot. And if all you're going to do is shoot once to kill one vehicle, fine. And if that's all the weapon you have, one good anti-tank weapon, because that vehicle looks like it. The exploded other shots we have, maybe it's more this stuff down here, I don't know. Or that may be just a different vehicle, but it looked like that one vehicle was effectively knocked out and people hurt. And all these guys laying down around here, that they're sort of staying there. They may be staying there to shoot, or they may be staying there because they're injured. So we may have a few more casualties. There may be a bunch of machine gun fire going on. So the problem is after this initial thing happens, you got this whole column that's going to react to you. So you need a way to get out of there, and this doesn't look like it's a very good one. That's one problem. The other thing is, if you can have the time, if the Ukrainians had lads further up the road, they could have really capitalized. Well, what they should have done is, the one thing they did pick right is the location that this was opposite to their ambush, not this. You want to, if you can, if you have the manpower, is to do an L-shaped ambush. So as sort of Starstreak has said, have guys up the road. So I don't know how many guys, how far up the road, but it would be good if you could have, and you signal it with like, wait until, the sergeant shoots his in-laws, and you do not shoot until, one of our guys shoots first, the guy who's designated to shoot first, to wait for this thing, to have multiple along here. But you also want to have forces over here, L-shaped, like this. But even if you can't have a lot of forces over here, it would be good to have something over here. If you could have even gone over here, a lot of Russian grenades from the Cold War era were stick grenades, or even the sort of, oval-shaped grenades. They would come in a box, the grenades, and the fuses would generally not, big wooden box or metal tins. They would come in that, and they would generally come without the fuses in them. The fuses would be separate. Partially so, and this is the training that I got, partially so that you could decide to put in not the standard fuse that, you pull the ring out and you throw the grenade so the spoon or the handle goes off and it flies through the air, and in 3 seconds, 5 seconds, depending on the way it was set, it'd go boom. It's designed as the other kind of fuse that you would screw into it. And these things are pretty safe to screw in and unscrew, meaning average soldiers should be able to do it without harming yourself. Guerrillas, uneducated farmer guerrillas should be able to do it without harming yourself. Is to put in a fuse, and it would be marked differently, that would instantly go off. And some of the people that captured some of these things and put them together and then tried to use them and blew themselves up, they thought it was meant to be a booby trap type thing. No, what it really was meant to be used for, and this was for the guerrilla operations, this was stuff that was encountered a lot in Central America. So the Soviets were supplying it to guerrillas that were fighting like in El Salvador or wherever. Is that instead of setting it up to be a hand grenade to throw, what you would do is just if you got 5 minutes on a situation like this, you don't have time probably. But if you've got a little bit of time and you know that this is a road, the Russians are going to be coming down at some time, we'll get the word a few minutes before, but what we're going to do is they would come in and they get some wire and some wooden stakes, and they would put a stake in the ground here, put a stake with the grenade strapped to the stake here, then another stake up here, and they would put the wire connecting it. So anything that pulls on that wire, the grenade would go off instantly. So it was set up to be not a landmine that you stepped on, but in essence a landmine that was a larger area and was visible, generally speaking, if you were carefully looking for it. But if you're running away from being shot at, you would trip it. So this would be the kill zone over here. So you ambush it, they would run you want to have an open zone here, so possibly an L-shaped if you have the people to be firing as they move it over to here. But you would at least try to put some grenades or something over here to fight. So the best way to deal with this here is not to do what these Russians did by driving these APCs over this way, but to immediately turn and drive straight in at these people. That was my training to deal with an ambush, is you have to sort of assess, because even if there's like a good but a cover over here, they do it on purpose. They do an ambush to have the cover, you know, like a drainage ditch or something along the side here, because they've set up a secondary element of the ambush to shoot down to destroy that. So normally your anti-ambush drill is not to run away from the attack, is to run directly at the attack, so these APCs should have been trained in these tanks to just drive straight into them, shooting your machine guns, and when you get close enough or whatever, the troops bailing out the back. To avoid those kind of ambushes, the Russians should have, okay, I agree, but if you don't have enough forces, what can you do? Well, absolutely, Arno. And yeah, that's what I said. If you're just a few guys, the big thing I'm saying they're doing wrong here is they didn't seem to me to have a good enough escape path. That is my estimation of, again, armchair generaling it, but from what I'm looking here, is they didn't have a good what to do now situation. That's my estimation here. Yeah, Martin. Well, that's what I was trained to do as a counter ambush drill, is not to sit and fight, not to run away. Now, if you've got guys that you assess, part of the column, your patrol. Now, what I was trained was small unit patrolling, guys walking down a trail kind of thing, but you can expand it into this vehicle thing, is yes, if you got guys outside of the kill zone, you stop them. Now, again, as you're the commander and whoever is assessing it, whether it's the commander or the commander of this platoon and this platoon and this platoon, but, these guys out here assess, oh, well, the shooting seems to be over here, so the enemy's probably over here, is then you unload the troops and you start swinging around through here, but you try to communicate with these guys to, stop line so you don't, get in the way of their shooting. But if these guys did their proper thing and attack into it, these guys would be swinging in around to try to deal with anybody leaving. So that's just my counter ambush situation here. But good for them. They seem to have done effective. If they survived, that was a good ambush. If they didn't survive, it's a bad ambush, because I don't know that you want to trade however many people that were. Now, of course, the one thing it could be, here's what it could be that we don't know. The tricky thing would be is to set that thing up, that rocket, so that there's nobody there, and that you have a command detonated launch. So you're using the drone and you have it marked out on the road that when it gets to this place, you push the button, it fires the thing. I don't know if they're set up with any of those kind of things, some little solenoid mechanism that would somehow, trigger the device to fire, and you build a stand. The other thing, of course, you could do, but that I don't think was the first vehicle in line, would be to run a tripwire across the road. And then as the first vehicle, and you again watch and see the enemy approaching, you get, John out there, the missiles preset and go, and he just quickly runs the wire across the road, sets it and runs away, and hopefully no friendlies use that road, because you only do it after you spot the enemy column coming, and you set it up as a tripwire a mine and take it out. That would be a good way of dealing with this. Let's see what this is. Okay, I'm not sure. This is from Sky TV. Let's see. Why did I save this? I saved things last day or two that I thought would be good for this talk, illustrating some point. Okay. Friday News Continue across the Ukraine. Sky News is verified location has this video. Okay. So, I don't think anyone's doubting the sort of strategical ability of Russia to damage cities in Ukraine. So now, I don't know how that necessarily achieves the victory of the war. Maybe their victory of the war is try to depopulate the area, get them to flee as refugees, and then call it a victory. And I don't need to hear these people talking, but they are able to effectively destroy things in there. Okay, let's see here. Next. Okay. This is interesting, and again, this goes to what does this mean to us in the world? This war in Ukraine, not so much the combat. This story from Fight for Freedom, Stand with Hong Kong, an account that I've been following for some time since looking at what's going on in Hong Kong. They're at least for a while. I don't know if they still are. They were on the ground in Hong Kong. But China and Russia are setting up, because the ruble is crashing versus Western currency, they're setting up so that Russians can move their money into the yuan. That's the Chinese currency. Banks is still in Russia, but it's going to be, have the value hold in the yuan instead of the ruble. And they're moving over the credit card systems, moving over from Visa to China's Union Pay system. Now, Tim Pool, I don't know if you know him, he's a commentator on it. I watch a bunch of his stuff. He's bemoaning, well, if you kick the Russians out of SWIFT and you kick all this stuff out, you're just setting up a two-world system now, and it's going to be bad. You're no longer going to have everyone relying upon the US dollar, blah, 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 blah. Well, like a lot of people out there, he's young. He's in his 30s. He doesn't remember the Cold War. China and Russia used to not be part of the banking system in the world. Their money, you could go in and you could, as you were a tourist, you could go in and buy, hand some dollars over and get some local currency, but major transactions were not allowed. We are heading, and the Cold War wasn't terrible. Cold War doesn't mean World War III and nuclear missiles. So the mere fact that they're moving away from the dollar and setting up an international exchange in the yuan may just further isolate certain nations like Russia, like China, and might be a good thing. It might just be a good thing. Because of what's happening here, because how dramatic, and I think it is fairly dramatic, of what's going on, we are, I think China is seeing that if they were to invade Taiwan right now, I almost said Ukraine, if China invaded Ukraine now, but if China invade Taiwan right now, I think they're seeing that the yuan and the banking systems may get shut down. Now, we're more integrated in America, particularly with things like medicine, to China than we are with Russia, the U.S. But I don't think Europe is as integrated into China's economy. So I don't know how hard, or because if China takes Taiwan, TSMC, one of the main chip manufacturers in the world, and that stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturer Corporation, I believe is what TSMC stands for. That is the big thing. Now, I believe they also do have some factories. They do have some factories, I believe, in mainland China as well. But if China were to secure Taiwan, whether Taiwan's a wreck or Taiwan is intact, we would see the overwhelming majority of computer chips manufactured by China, and that is strategically a major Hey, Ragar. Yes, we're talking modern political situation today. So it would be very, very bad for the world if China is a single point control over all of this stuff. And I think they're seeing that the economic pain could be greater than currently whatever the gain would be from getting Taiwan. So I think the international reaction, again, this is my assessment. What do I know? I just look at history and watch history. I don't know all the behind the scenes, whatever. But I think they're seeing that the pain is great and realize an invasion of Taiwan is a naval operation. The U.S. has in commission right now 11 supercarriers. If Britain's carriers are supercarriers or not, I don't know, but they're big, but I don't know if you quite call them supercarriers. But they only have 2 of them. China is trying to get a big carrier or 2 manufactured, but we have 11 in commission. Right now, I think we have 4 or 5 in actual deployment. In commission, just they may be, some may be doing major. Several of them are doing major refits. I don't know if I saved an infographic on where the U.S. are deploying their carriers currently, but I believe 2 of them are sitting roughly off China on the Western Pacific, if you will. So they have very much been told, we've got carriers there, and I think the carrier and the nuclear attack submarines that we have there can dramatically damage an invasion fleet, and Taiwan takes its defense preparedness very seriously. We used to have a visitor who was to the videos, hasn't been around in probably a year or more. He was from the Ma. His family ancestry was involved with the Ma clique. You may be familiar with some of the games in faction in nationalist China, and for a while he sort of disappeared because he was doing his national service in the Taiwanese army. But they do take their training seriously. EA and US are 80 million people, the other 7 billion. Yeah, well, there's a very interesting graphic at how a lot of people are focused in Asia. A lot more people, or half the world's population is in one fairly small circle. They suffer and they know how to live. It's not live in poverty, but it's I don't know if it's quite that cheap going down to the ruble. Come on, U.S. could manufacture the chips. Intel has manufacturing facilities in Indonesia. Yes, well, they are trying to set up more manufacturing facilities in the U.S. right now as I speak. And they have been doing this for more than a year. It's going to take them a while to do it. I think the U.S. is realizing national security is important, and national security isn't just the weapons, it's also manufacturing capabilities. So I think the U.S. is starting to realize it's the main problem was trying to cut China out of high-end chip manufacturing technology. China had to accelerate development of its own. Yeah, there's definitely a chip manufacturing, because I saw a really, Asianometry channel, I just think that's how you pronounce it, on YouTube, was looking, and I got about halfway through and got the point of it, so I didn't continue watching, but he was going over all the details of starting with the Soviets and continuing to modern day Russia, current day Russia, attempts at making chip manufacturing, and how there is one company that does make chips in Russia, but it's basically like for chips that go into credit cards, just sort of minor piddling little chips, and they just don't, and they even for that stuff they have to import the manufacturing components from the West, so they're just woefully behind. And Putin has been, in the last 5 or 10 years or something, has been pushing Russia to increase its chip manufacturing, but they're just failing miserably, according to this video. China Contain $3 billion in U.S. debt. China is able to break the American economy. I think carriers are unuseful. Now the Navy works with missiles and not with cannons anymore. Well, the Navy, is has a bunch of Virginia-class submarines, and I definitely know that a lot of people think the Navy is the submarines is the way for naval operations. The carriers can launch missiles. The carriers are a missile launching platform because see, I don't know if you understand this, Cola. I'll just call you Cola. Carriers carry airplanes. They have these airplanes on them, and the airplanes take off. The airplanes fly around, and the airplanes launch missiles. So the airplanes have missiles on them, and they have ship-killing missiles on them. So the carriers don't need to go park themselves in between, in the Straits of Taiwan, in between Taiwan and the mainland to become a target. The carriers can sit to the east of Taiwan, out in the ocean somewhere, wandering around, so that it's harder to target them with ballistic missiles. They have anti-ballistic missile systems, which include both things like the Sea Whiz to shoot, with guns to shoot missiles out of the air, as well as either themselves, the carriers, but more likely the cruisers and the Aegis class cruisers and the destroyers that are around them have missiles that are designed to shoot down incoming missiles. So these are moving around, a moving target, unlike, say, Taiwan, which the targets are fixed, or Japan, that has moved some missiles onto some of the uninhabited or very sparsely inhabited islands that are sort of competing. They've moved some missile batteries, anti-air and or anti-ship missiles. I'm not sure exactly which batteries they put on them, but those are known locations that they can just bombard with missiles. Carriers can move around, so it's harder to know where they are. And of course, you can start setting up to shoot down Chinese spy satellites, observation satellites, to try to keep them from identifying where your carriers are, and shoot down other satellites that might inform them, anything that you don't control, any civilian satellites that you think are an observation satellite. So the carriers can sit out there, launch the aircraft fly sort of near the actual area of operation, but still in a standoff distance, and fire their missiles at incoming ships. So carriers are a very, very valuable operation ability when you're talking about a global deployment. We're the U.S. and we're deploying to the Western Pacific, or we're the U.S. and we're deploying to the Eastern Mediterranean. That we have aircraft there that we can launch from the Mediterranean and strike at targets in, say, Crimea or Ukraine or just the Black Sea if we wish to. So carriers carry missiles because they carry aircraft that have missiles. So they are just a mobile airbase, and they're extremely effective at that. And we have submarines that also carry anti-shipping missiles, so that they don't even have to get torpedo close to an incoming ship. They have tubes that they can be under the water, fire their missiles. Their missiles go 20-30 miles through the air and then strike the ships, and they're very, very hard to target. So yes, a frigate can hit a carrier from but I'm saying they got a ring of anti-missiles coming in, of anti-missile defense around the carrier. That's what the Aegis class cruisers and the other destroyers, they are specifically set up to protect a carrier from both air and undersea attack. And they plan on it, to knock a lot of stuff out of the sky. Now, maybe the incoming missiles will get through. I don't know. We have not seen anybody shoot at a U.S. carrier group in a very, very long time. So, they're missile launchers, but that's you don't do gunboat diplomacy with submarines. Submarines' main strength is stealth. Carrier battle group is a great intimidation factor. And so you can, and see, even the idea of the carrier battle group is, let's just say China decides to invade Taiwan. One of their first things, like we saw in Ukraine, but probably would be more so, China will launch attacks on Taiwanese air bases and try to destroy their aircraft on the ground. I do know there's at least some hardened hangars, that I don't know how much they'll be able to take direct hits. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, I don't know, but they might be able to defend direct hits. But they might destroy a lot of aircraft on the ground. Okay. Well, what the U.S. can do is they can sit hundreds of miles, 1,000 miles out in the ocean from China, launch their aircrafts. Their aircrafts can fly, can land in Taiwan, after the initial attacks, can land in Taiwan, get refueled in Taiwan, take off again from, as long as they're repairing the runways, take off from Taiwan, do an airstrike on incoming ships, launch all their weapons, turn around. Maybe just with one gas fuel up, they have enough gas to get all the way home to the carrier, fly all the way back to the carrier, get to the carrier, rearm, and rinse and repeat. So the carriers may really try to stay, hundreds. If you look at let me just, let's see, I want to move this tab to new window. I want to come here, Google Maps. There we go. Okay. See, the operational, for when we were doing air cover for Afghanistan, yes, we definitely had Bagram, there's Kabul, there's Bagram Air Base here. We definitely had air operations there. But some of our air operations were being, where do we get the, where is Diego Garcia, British Indian Ocean Territory. Yeah, this is, well, one of these is Diego Garcia. Okay, well, those are the Maldives. I don't know. I guess this Google Maps isn't showing up Diego Garcia well. But Diego Garcia is way down in here. And so they were operating aircraft out of here that would fly up, fly around, do attacks, and then come all the way back down here. So they can operate, they can park the carrier way out here. The aircraft can fly here, refuel, strike, fly all the way back to here, and just keep, So it's a mobile airbase that can be very, very effective. The Japanese originally thought they would make helicopter carriers for anti-submarines and call it a destroyer, totally obliterate Chinese submarines. Then they found the Chinese were serious with making their own carriers. Yes. And what the Japanese sort of have is as a carrier, sort of a, they have one, I think, that is, vertical takeoff and landing only capable. It's as smaller than things that we don't call a carrier, we call an amphibious landing ship. That can carry, what's going on? Oh, we got maybe another update here. Okay, let's take a quick look at this. Since we're doing this, this is that Twitter account, because notice they say the UK stands with Ukraine, and this is the Ministry of Defense. Okay, the latest, this is an hour ago as we're live here. Okay, intelligence update. President Putin has publicly welcomed the recruitment of 16,000 mostly Middle Eastern volunteers. I still wonder whether, he may have publicly welcomed it, but I still wonder if this is real. That there's 16,000 of them. I don't believe that, but I don't know. To support his invasion of Ukraine, Syrian mercenaries have deployed alongside Russian proxy forces in Libya since late 2020. Okay, I did not know that there was Syrians in Libya. I knew that they were Russians, and the Syrian mercenary forces are operating in Syria. I knew that for a fact, but I didn't know Libya. This follows earlier reporting that Russia was also planning to deploy experienced mercenaries from the Russian private military corporations I forget the name of the group, to support the invasion. Russia this week have been forced to acknowledge the use of conscript soldiers in its operations against Ukraine. As losses mount, Russia will be forced to draw on alternative sources to reinforce their invasion, to overstretch regular forces. So I think it's incredibly telling that big Russia needs to import troops. Superpower Russia needs more manpower from Syria. I think that's very telling. I think that is, and let's see here. Yeah. Okay. We're sort of coming to near the end of at least programmed or planned topics here. This is from Historical Firearms, a very good website here, and yeah, this is what I want to get to here. This rundown of Western anti-tank weapons for Ukraine. Oh, so post any questions you have or comments. Hello, Hannibal Bonaparte. Russians don't like killing people that are similar to them. Well, what evidence do you have of that? I will say. They certainly killed a lot during the Holodomor. Now, maybe they didn't like it, but they did it. So, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what evidence you have to back that up. I'm not saying you're wrong. That's just sort of a statement. So I don't know, without evidence. I have not seen videos of a Russian crying as he's mowing down Ukrainians and going, I hate that I have to shoot people that are similar to myself. They may be, but I don't have that evidence of it. I actually say a meme with a therapist telling Putin, where is this so-called superpower? Right. Oh yes, I've seen that. Yes, I've seen that meme. Yeah. Oh, well, like I said, Hannibal, it does not seem the will to fight is strong with the Russian soldiers invading Ukraine. I don't know that will wouldn't be strong if they were defending what they saw as their homeland. They may be very vigorous to fight if there were NATO forces invading Mother Russia. They might be, stand and fight and die and wanted to fight hard. They very well may be willing to do that, but it currently appears, and I have no control over any of these ads, appears that they don't have the stomach to fight hard and die for the invasion. Russians went relatively inconsequences. If they use standard Grozny-style splat stuff by artillery, the whole operation would be over much faster. Well, I think for Grozny, or if you're looking at other stuff down in Georgia down there and the Chechens, it's a much smaller area battlefield. If you look at the size of Chechnya, or you look at the size of Georgia down there as a landmass, it's a much smaller landmass. So it's different. Some of them have surrendered instead of attacking Ukrainians. Well, that very well. I mean, see, I don't trust Hannibal. I don't trust what any of these either party's saying. I think there's so much propaganda. So whether they surrendered instead of attacking Ukrainians, or were they attacking Ukrainians and they got a lot of return fire and their vehicles were broken down, so instead of fighting and dying, they surrendered. And then they, of course, tell a good story. Like, oh, I didn't want to hurt the Ukrainian people, so I just decided to surrender. And they're willing to tell that to the cameras because they're trying to put a good face on it. I'm not saying that's not true. I just don't trust anything that I'm get told by these people, by either side. I mean, I'm in support of, again, if those of you who are new here, I'm fully in support of the Ukrainian side on this war. I just don't trust what they're telling me. I can get that the Americans might be a bit meh if they were ordered to invade Canada. Yeah, I know, but invading Canada would be, 500 guys could do it with sharp pointy sticks, and Canada couldn't probably do anything about it. But yeah, we might not. Mexico might be the better thing. Is we probably would be. We got to go into Mexico. That's just a shithole. And why are we going into Mexico? And the Mexicans would try to fight. They would fight the content. Yeah, I don't know. It's an advertisement here. Yes. Okay. Rundown of Western anti-tank. So they seem to be getting the whole plethora. I believe that's a star streak there. That's various stuff. I just wanted to quickly go over some of the pictures that we're looking at and seeing. Now, I don't know, when we're seeing a picture like this, I don't know where they are in Ukraine. I don't know if they're like 2 miles over the border from Poland, or if they're over next to the Donbass. I don't know, or if they're around Kiev. So I don't know how far these missiles that are coming in. Turn off the audio. You can see shooting it at something from on a rooftop, and they've got binoculars there. I should expand this up large. Oh, it's not letting me expand it larger. Right. This is in Sumi, supposedly. I know a lot of you have already seen these videos. Oh, it's going over to the Twitter account. I just want to see. So he's firing the German Panzerfaust III. There, that's obviously unguided. Yeah, they seem to be getting a lot of these missiles, and in my opinion, Australian C-17. I didn't know Australia had any C-17s. Interesting. Okay. Being loaded with supplies for Ukraine at RAAF Richmond, which I presume is in Australia. It's Royal Australian Air Force. I believe that's what that stands for. So they're loading supplies. And so long as the West, in my opinion, and this is firing a Carl Gustaf, that's a Swedish, and it's a Canadian Army, but it's Swedish, at least designed. I don't know who's manufacturing it. Anti-tank missile. Now, one of the Carl Gustaf versions was specifically set up to, in about the length of the missile launcher, to absorb the backblast, so that it could be one of the versions. So it could be fired from within buildings without like killing yourself or severely harming yourself. That was one of the advances in the late 90s, I believe. But, about as effective, maybe a little more, a little less than an RPG-7. And you see, RPG-7s, you can have the old classic one, or you can have various grenades on them that double warhead. So the first one explodes the reactive armor, the second warhead punches through the regular armor behind that. And this, I guess, is a Spanish weapon. So long as the West is willing to feed this looks like the old Laws. Oh no, they're firing a RPG-26. So that's a Russian-made version of the Laws rocket, which is a single fire it straight, light, not so much to kill a tank, but kill an APC kind of thing, or just shoot at a position truck or something. Not the same language as in Mexico. What do you mean not the same language as in Mexico? They speak Spanish in Mexico. They speak Spanish in Mexico. Oh, Mexico, there's a lot down there. They speak Spanish. They speak the same language. Canadian light infantry are a force to be reckoned with. Nah. They disbanded their paratroopers a while ago. They wouldn't last very long. So yeah, I mean, if you don't think Spanish is a language spoken in our nation, you haven't gone to you haven't walked outside recently. probably about half the people I encounter walking out of my home and seeing people, or driving someplace and seeing people, about half the people I encounter, their first language is Spanish. Now, I'm not saying they don't speak English also, but their first language is Spanish. So I don't know, well, I'd say about half the people I encountered outside of my home here in Southern California will speak Spanish as their first language. Okay, Cola, good having you here. Yeah, we'll get to some stuff probably next weekend. Well, yeah, U.S. people speak Americana, which is another term for that would be Spanglish, sort of a mix of English and Spanish. Yes, so yeah, no, they speak Spanish down in Mexico, for sure. Yeah, okay, I think, oh, well, let me look through some of my other infographics here if there's something else I wanted to cover here before the end of today. Just cover everything. Propaganda from the Kiev Independent. I'm guessing it's some sort of news publication. They're saying 12,000 troops, 49 planes, 81 helicopters, 335 tanks, 130 artillery pieces. Now, I did not see in anything that I saved. Let me see if I go up to the top again. See if somehow I skipped it. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Oh, here. Oh, this is another video I wanted to highlight. Sort of mentioning with the artillery pieces. Okay, this is supposedly a Russian artillery battery. I think there are some signs of white Z's around. Oh, I want to turn off the audio again. These are D-30 artillery pieces. I can just recognize Cold War era artillery pieces. They are a 120 millimeter howitzer. Okay, so we see that wish the quality is a little better. The D-30s look in operational condition. They look at, I'm not absolutely sure. They're fairly advanced for the Cold War. That's a vehicle engine. So this is somebody here. There's a vehicle moving right up there that looks tracked right now. That looks like he's actively moving at this point. So this was a battery, and I believe it's a Russian battery. Now, if somebody has seen this and confirms that this is not a Russian battery, I would like to know, either live or later on. But okay, let's analyze this. This is another thing I found interesting here. Kill the audio. It seemed to be they targeted primarily the trucks, which is sort of smart because that's where the ammunition is and a lot of the people will be there. And we can see the trucks are, devastated. It looks like a lot of, because this, something hit right, okay, pause, back. Something hit right here. All this blackening is a sort of impact here. This is something hit there. This and these pieces blew here from sort of behind, but there doesn't seem to be any hits, any impacts in this forward position where the artillery is. I'm finding this on Twitter. This is a Twitter post. So I think, like I say, this could be Ukrainian, but I think it's. Let me just check and see here. It says Russian artillery position. Again, we talked about just saying the information warfare is going on. This could be a mistake. Is there? Yeah, no, they're D-30 howitzers, I do believe. They're 120 millimeter, but they're D-30. Okay, yeah, I think. I'm just trying to see if there was some strong identification that they're saying that that they were Ukrainian. I don't see anybody challenging that these are Russian vehicles, and that white stripe makes me think that that's. I don't think the Ukrainians would be painting on it, and it looks like this white stripe looks like it predates the damage. Can't be sure, but I'm thinking that's vehicle recognition for Russians. The Ukrainians seem to be, they either have digital camouflage or the same Russian green, but they're putting yellow or yellow and blue on their vehicles as recognition. So I think this is a Russian unit. It looks like there's like 12 or so artillery pieces. I haven't counted them. Okay. And you notice all these artillery pieces are pointed at the exact same location. And this is critical. This is critical. This is no, and I mean it, no U.S. artillery unit since at least 1990 would be deployed like this. Zero, none. Absolutely none. We would never deploy an artillery unit like this, because all these guns, because their guns are all pointing in the exact same direction with all the exact same elevation. So they were all set up here in this position to fire at one location. Yeah, but I don't know how Crouchy, if the Z was uniformly done everywhere for all invading forces, or if, just say, maybe the forces come up from Crimea into Ukraine, they might just be putting white stripes on things. Sometimes you find, because I look at World War II vehicle recognition, one division does it slightly different than another division, but they're both similar. So, and so it's this. I'm thinking this is vehicle recognition enough that it's Russian. Just go when I send Princess Patricia like 15. No, you won't be scared about that. They can't get over to the Netherlands. So, like I said, the U.S. wouldn't do this. The reason they've done this is so that one guy, one guy has a map, and he figures out where he is on the map. There could be a crossroads up there, and go, okay, we're right just off this crossroads, and then so let's just say that this is a map, and there's crossroads over here, and so we're right here on it. Let's just say, and okay, it figures out where he is, and then somebody says we want to have an artillery barrage over here. Okay, so they're on the map, if this was a map. They're over here and they want an artillery barrage over there. So this one guy figures out, okay, well, the distance it is and the direction. And so he figures out how to point the gun. It's going to be at this azimuth, at this elevation. Okay, so then he can tell all of these guns the same set of information. Point your guns in this direction, because they're all so closely together. They're, there's at least two here, and you're jumping around a lot. Okay, I'm trying to. This isn't showing terribly great. You see, so those are rounds stacked back a little ways to be carried up to be shot. Here's a close-up of them. Now this is just a projectile. These look like here would be the propellants. So that would be a propellant, that would be a projectile. These are in two-part ammunition. And so there's, I can identify 1, 2, 3, 4 at least here. So if we come back to the original here, some of the original position. They sort of kind of look down on it. Yeah. I would say there's at least 8 or so vehicles or guns here. But they're also parked close together. And so they're ripe for this. So something spotted this location and put a lot of ordnance on it, and enough that they specifically targeted the trucks and not the artillery, because there was no rounds impacting in front of it, all rounds impacting the back. You can see the rounds hit these trees or whatever. The flames blew up and blew off the light branches, where you see the heavy branches further on down here. So this was all well targeted counterattack. Whatever hit this position knew right where it was. So the U.S. would spread their guns out more. Each gun would be independently aimed. So that they would not be near each other. You could not do a single strike like this. You would have to target each gun and its support. And you would put at least each gun, even if it was towed artillery, at least each gun as far away from each other as this whole group is spread out. So, hello, Mr. Anderson again. Okay, thanks for hanging out with me, Martin Smith. More serious film than local realities. Yeah. Red Dawn, the movie, the original movie. I didn't see the sort of remake thingy, but yeah. If you're willing to fight a guerrilla warfare, you can do a lot of damage to people. And so yeah, this shows to me poor training, poor doctrine, poor equipment, in that, well, one, it's an old artillery piece, at least 1970s in design. I don't know for sure when it was made, but the way I was taught that the Soviets trained, particularly on tanks, but I think it holds true for artillery, is most Soviet tank battalions would have, or companies, or, well, either companies or battalions, maybe companies or maybe battalions, I forget, but most of them would have one tank. I had to have the full equipment of all the tanks most of them would have all the tanks they were supposed to have, but they'd have one tank, and that one tank would be the tank they would drive around for training purposes. They would drive the one tank around, so they would put wear and tear on that one tank. And so if they were going to go to, and there was an exception, supposedly I was trained in, the U.S. Army may be misinforming me when I was going through my training in Army ROTC, but there was sort of the Moscow district who were sort of elite. They trained better, and the Russian forces, the sort of elite Russian forces put into East Germany trained differently. But the rest were trained, they'd have one tank they would drive around. And so each crew would, one would drive around the obstacle course or training course. Okay, good. Fire a few rounds. Next crew, get in that same tank. So all the rest of the tanks in storage weren't having any maintenance needed to be done. Keeping the cost down. No wear and tear on the tanks. And we talked earlier on about the 1984 version. Oh, I remember when that first came out. I was in high school at the time. So how bad the maintenance was on the variable tire pressure trucks, and the idea that they may have just been let sitting for 10 years and not moved, or however long, is what the guy who supposedly knew what he was talking about was evaluating why it wasn't working so well. So the Russians had this tendency to not use up the tanks, just use up one, to train all of them. Well, that may get you good driver's training. It may get you good, I'm not saying it does if it gives enough, and it may get you good, shooting, target accuracy, but it doesn't get you good coordinated attacks. I was trained that the Soviets would sort of attack like we're seeing here with their tanks in formation, coming at you, and just keep that formation going as you attacked it, and not try to do individual maneuverings with tanks. Is fight in formation. That's how, and the U.S. was obviously watching Russian training war games and their doctrine, so they sort of kind of knew. So it's very likely these artillery pieces may have been sitting around since the 1970s, and they're training on just one gun to get the gun drill down, and firing practice ammo, which is cheap ammo to shoot. So these guns may have just been sitting around all that time, not hardly used, and so they've been brought out. And again, we looked earlier on at they did maintenance on all the tanks. Well, the idea is that they wouldn't put the wear and tear on all the other tanks of driving them around. I don't know what maintenance they would have done on a tank that was parked in a field or a warehouse for a year or 5 years or 10 years. I don't know what they would have done, but the idea is not to put mileage on, or gun tube wear on all their tanks, to just train on one, so the rest are ready to go. And whether you bring the by that time, so you slowly use it up, and so then you might get a replacement tank and use one of the other old ones. And maybe once in a while, like once a year, they would all get all their tanks together, and for the weekend or whatever, or for the week, try to drive in formation, then go park them again and leave them and just do the update training with the one tank. That's what I was trained, not saying it's fact, but that's what I was trained that the Soviets would do. And again, I'm trying to use the different terms for Soviet or Russian as appropriate. Yeah, it's a D-30. Yeah. Yep, that's a D-30 howitzer. Absolutely. 120 millimeter howitzer. And so there's Ukrainian independent, so this is propaganda. Keep that in mind, just saying 123 artillery pieces destroyed. Those, well, the battery is destroyed. The guns look like they're in fine shape. 1,105 armored personnel carriers. It seems like an awful lot killed or knocked out, or losses. MLRS systems. We've definitely seen MLRS systems of various types being damaged. 2 boats. Don't know about that. Vehicles. Sure. Yeah. Fuel trucks. Yeah. UAVs. 7. Okay. Anti-aircraft missile warfare things. 29. Okay. Again, a lot of this is propaganda. I don't know how good their stats are, and I don't trust them. But I just wanted to bring that up. Of course, I was expected from conscription, so that's what I heard. Oh, you were exempted from conscription, Rhaegar. Okay, yeah, I'm just saying, this is what I was taught in the late stages of the Cold War when I went through Army Reserve training. I never actually went into the Army. It was the Army getting ready, and I did not go into the Army because Cold War ended, and I didn't want to go into the post-Cold War Army at the time, so I decided not to continue. But I did get some training. A lot of the money sent for maintenance probably disappears to its corruption. Yeah, Starscream, but to a point, it's within the Soviet system. It wasn't so much money; it was availability of, if you shoot I don't know what the lifespan is, and it's counted in numbers of shots fired of a tank barrel gun. Tank gun, the barrel of the tank. And so it might be 200 rounds. I mean, it's not like War Thunder. It might be, 500 rounds. And once you've fired all those rounds, you got to get a new tank barrel. And so the idea is, and now you can still use the tank barrel, but it's worn out, so you're no longer very accurate with it. It still may be functional, but it's not properly functional. So instead of shooting all the guns, they shot one of the guns or drove. The transmission has 500 miles on it before it needs major overhaul and possibly replacement. So they didn't want to drive all those tanks around. So it was and they couldn't necessarily get replacement in the Soviet system, a replacement transmissions or whatever. So I think some of this, looking at what I'm seeing, the way the Russians are fighting, their sort of panic at a vehicle, like we talked about, I know you were there, the counter ambush drill, that they reacted, but they reacted in the way that I would expect a panicked reaction to be, running away from the attack, not running towards it, and is what I would be trying to get them to do. So they're doing what I the ambusher would want them to do, whether you're prepared for it. Because if they're running away, that also allows you to, after ambushing them, to run away. How do they kill? I don't know what 2 boats means. Does that mean 2 ships, or does that mean 2 rowboats? I don't know what 2 boats means. Hi, Thomas K. I have found a website that lists confirmed equipment destroyed with each individual item having a link to pictures. Yeah, yeah. I'm not. As I've been saying, Thomas, I just don't trust from either side anything I'm seeing. I don't trust it. Both sides are doing the combination, and I know some of you have been here for the whole thing and some of you haven't, but the combination of information warfare and influence warfare. Those are related but two different things. And so I was just trying to analyze what I can see, what I've identified. So get back to, can the Russians win? What is winning at this point? Supposedly, I don't know if this is true, supposedly the Ukrainians are offering up peace deals. I don't know exactly what they're offering, but I believe territorial concessions. You know, the Donbass, or we'll recognize you owning Crimea, or whatever it is. And supposedly the Russians are saying no. So, and as Ari pointed out, I think the Russians are continuing to push and are getting prepared for another major push. Trying to move in forces, trying to locate, get forces into the region. They are having a tremendous problem supplying their forces on the ground. My understanding is that they have a decent military airlift capacity, but they are afraid to use it because they think it'll be shot out of the sky, or enough of it will be, that it's too expensive. Flying in a bunch of AK-47 ammunition just to have the aircraft that's, multi-million-dollar aircraft fall out of the sky, and having, even just 10% of them fall out of the sky per, if there's 10 aircraft flying, one of them falls out. The next day, out of the sky, the next day, 9 aircraft coming in, one of them falls out of the sky. If even just one day they're shooting down one aircraft each time, that attrition isn't worth bringing in AK-47 ammunition or food or whatever. And I think they have not had the logistics companies, and I think these forces have moved into areas and they're not getting effective resupply. I think the Ukrainians have. Yeah, I don't think absolutely, Mr. Anderson. I don't see any specific evidence of a second echelon of forces coming in. Like yourself, knowing the Russian Navy, mine clearers. Yeah, who knows, Starstreak? I don't know. My training was with the Soviet forces, that if they were attacked the NATO forces in NATO versus Warsaw Pact forces, the initial Soviet forces were designed to be used to exhaustion of the force, meaning they were going to attack on a pre-planned attack vectors to a particular goal. And when that force reached its goal, it was going to be destroyed, because if it achieved this goal, it was going to be destruction of that force. They had no plans for unit integrity after that point. It was not that everybody was going to be dead, but as a fighting force, it was going to be destroyed. So they were going to, the tanks were going to move west, and the armored personnel carriers were going to move west, and they might have a few fuel trucks behind them to refuel a bit, but they were going to take such losses in their advance that those forces were going to be, hey, Van Bishop, how you doing? We're going to be destroyed to such a degree that there was no point in having more fuel trucks, because they were just going to be, the forces were going to be destroyed, and it was the second echelon was going to come in after the first one and continue the fight, where the NATO forces were going to try to keep unit integrity in the fight and plan logistically to keep keep supplying them more ammunition. It's the idea, you only need so much ammunition in the tank because it's going to survive 10 minutes in combat, and then it's going to be destroyed. Now, hopefully in that 10 minutes, it's going to kill 3 other tanks, but then it's going to die. And so you don't need to, in actual fighting, you may drive for a while more before you get to it. Depends on how close you are to the fight when you start, but it's going to die quickly, but it's going to kill some of the enemy as it dies. And this formation is going to attrit itself on its attacks. That's what I was trained to expect. And then the second echelon was going to come in after it. That was going to be an intact force. And that force, the second echelon, was going to overwhelm the remaining NATO defenses, kind of thing. And the second echelon, of course, didn't need extra ammunition because it hadn't been fighting, or fuel more than planned to get to the location. Well, and food, and so you had enough food for 7 days or whatever the Soviets would have, because after 7 days that force was no longer useful, and the next force coming behind it would be bringing its own food and whatever else. So they don't have a logistics set up to do this, and I don't think. Again, I don't know, but I don't think they're controlling the roadways enough that the Ukrainians can't or aren't ambushing resupply columns, because it didn't save any for this, but it definitely looks like some of the stuff that are Russian forces out there that are destroyed look like supply truck columns. And another thing, an interesting thing is, this was one of a current serving U.S. Army major in the armor that I follow his Twitter account. He's asked if anybody could post a verifiable picture of an armored or of a recovery vehicle in the Ukraine, whether it's an armored or unarmored recovery vehicle. And he has not been able to find a single photo or video of a Russian recovery vehicle. A few engineering vehicles that you can sort of kind of recover vehicles with, but no recovery vehicles. So whoever planned this operation had no plans to deal with maintenance casualties, meaning vehicles stop working because of, needing maintenance. Not necessarily that they're poor maintenance, but not stop working because they're blown to pieces. You don't need to recover that, maybe, because you can just maybe push it off the side of the road or whatever and keep going. But if you got 5 trucks rolling down the road, one of them breaks down. If you don't have any recovering vehicles, you don't have any maintenance, vehicles, all you can do is maybe shift some of the supplies into the other trucks and just abandon the truck and keep going. That's where the tractors come in, where they take them out. So it appears to me, with that information, that sort of insight, that they did not plan this to go on very long. There were, I think, and I looked this up. Okay, I'm trying to do an analysis of this conflict. And from my analysis, the area needs to be demilitarized or stuff flare up again, and it can. Yeah, well, I don't know. The Russian forces have a different doctrine, which isn't heavily based on repair and recovery, like the West. Yeah, I know. That's what I was sort of saying. But because there's a lot of road marches, meaning going a lot of distance, they just had they didn't even have any plans to recover any vehicles. I think there was, I looked this up yesterday, I think it was. I think in the the second U.S. invasion of Iraq, I think there were 23 Abrams vehicles were damaged or destroyed in the invasion. I think it was 23, but 9 were destroyed. Okay, 9 Abrams were listed as destroyed in the invasion of Iraq. And we've seen a lot of Russian tanks destroyed in this invasion. And yeah, I know they have some NLAWs and things that the Iraqis didn't have, but the Iraqis had lots of anti-tank missiles. lots of anti-tank missiles, including guided anti-tank missiles. Some of them may be old models, but they had lots of them. 9 Abrams were destroyed in the invasion of Iraq. And you want to hear the punchline of that? 7 of the 9 that were destroyed were from friendly fire. Probably from aircraft. Probably, I know Cripple was saying it sucked, no, but probably from A-10s or some other airstrikes. So 7 of the 9 were destroyed from friendly fire. I mean, it's meaning the Iraqis didn't destroy them. Oh, the other 2 that were destroyed, the crews destroyed them themselves because they had to abandon the tank, and they were in a position they couldn't recover it, and it was damaged and immobile or something. Something got them immobile, which may be enemy fire. I'm not saying it wasn't, but they were just damaged and were considered recoverable, but they weren't staying around. So the crews themselves destroyed their tank and then hopped on other tanks or whatever and got out of there. So basically the Iraqis damaged some Abrams. And there was all kinds of, and there was at least one supply column that was shot up. They had, I think it was Jessica Lynch was the woman who was captured from it, that they rescued from the hospital, that she was taken to an Iraqi hospital. They did a commando raid once one of the doctors came and let the Americans knew where she was, so they went in and got her out. And that was a supply column that turned down the wrong way down a road and got trapped and got shot up. But we didn't see a lot of stuff there. Repairing a tank engine takes about 2 days as compared to Western tanks taking about 30 minutes or so to change the engine. Yeah, absolutely right, Thomas. There is that, but still, so 2 of them were scuttled. So all the rest of the 23 were just damaged and recovered. But you see, the point is you have, this thing. Okay, let me pull this up here. This vehicle here. As far as I can tell at this point, we later see something that this is burning, but I don't know here, but this is, shall we say, largely intact. And this is an expensive piece of hardware. So the Russians, and this is definitely a Russian, you see the Z there. The Russians decided to abandon this vehicle. Why? Why didn't they, because a recovery vehicle, you talk about repairing, well, all you need is a functional recovery vehicle. Doesn't need to be a armored one. It can be a tow truck, but a tow truck designed to tow one of these things. That shows up, takes it, tows it to just a location. The crew is standing around next to it, smoking cigarettes, because probably the Russians would be doing so, smoking cigarettes next to it, holding their AKs to keep the locals away. While maybe the friendlies there, they take this vehicle, they tow it away to a location where they dump it, and the crew stands around with all the other crews, and they all create a logger, or a park of vehicles all parked up, of vehicles that are mostly functional but won't drive down the road, whether they've run out of gas or transmission brakes. They've rolled over a vehicle mine, blown up part of it, but they've recovered the vehicle and they park it somewhere because most of it is still functional, and it's a multi-million-dollar vehicle, and you put it in a location where you collect 20 or 30 of these, and the combinations of their crews and a small security force stays and hangs out to protect these vehicles. They may not get back into the operation, but they're not even trying this. They're just like, this don't work. We got to keep moving. Orders are to keep moving. Well, Igor and Ivan or whatever don't want to be left alone out in the middle of the plains of the Ukraine with guys with yellow armbands that are going to come hunt them at night. So they're not stinking around. So they split with everybody else. And so, yeah, these aren't recovered. And that's the point, is that they're not recovered. You see, that is, I think, this same vehicle here. I think it is. I'm not sure. This is before any of the other damage. I think this may be how they found it, because you can see later in some of the stuff that it's burning. But there's no fire or anything at the front of this vehicle. So this looks like it's an engineering casualty, not an attack casualty. Okay, don't know about that. Logger, yes. Didn't just shoot up, they surrendered and were executed. Okay, I don't know. Like national militia, yeah. Okay, yeah, well, I understand. The people that are here, yeah, they're national militia, so yeah, loggering up. And so we see this in how they're operating. And so even if just 2 or 3 of all these trucks were, recovery or tow trucks or whatever, designed to, if one of these things breaks down, you start towing it. Or you have, like the U.S. will also have, like carrier vehicles, that you would pull it up onto like a tank carrier kind of thing. You put it on and transport it away. So even if the wheels aren't going to turn on it, you just pull it up on there and then drive it away. And so more engineering casualties here, presumably, going on, and that's a U.S. Armored recovering vehicle. So yeah, we see that, and so they're just not prepared for a long distance campaign, and they're not prepared for irregular forces fighting behind what the front lines are, because either that anti-aircraft weapon system, because that's what it is, if I don't know the exact name, but is either the after its loss, either the Russians have retreated or they've continued to advance and the Ukrainian militia has showed up behind the lines. So they don't have control of the rear area, which is a bit of a problem. Which also shows me follow-on supply forces, if they're not escorted by significant fighting forces, just guys in trucks, and the guys in the trucks carrying their AK-47, and we look at that ambush video, you can do the ambush video, you can do the ambush with just a bunch of AKs. You don't need anything fancy at that point. And so you can be taking out whether it's resupply of food or resupply of ammo or fuel or anything else. You can do that. I wonder if there will be news switching to Soviet doctrine, but I think the Russians have trouble finding the real front line to blow a hole in. Yeah, no, I think the Soviets are looking at, and I think mistakenly so, are looking at if they can control a few cities, that's somehow going to make them winning. See, I'm an advocate for Sun Tzu. I believe Sun Tzu is my guiding light. I know I can't quote all of his stuff. I've read his translations of his book 4 or 5 times, including commentaries added to it. Okay. The purpose is to get your opponent to do what you want to do, what you want them to do. That's the purpose. And so of anything. So if you can get your opponent to do something without fighting the battle, you win. So if Switzerland won in World War II because its military, its purpose was not to get anybody to invade Switzerland. Since nobody invaded Switzerland, they win because they achieved their objectives. Okay, So not that they fought some big battle and defeated whether the Allies or the Axis or something like that. No, they won by having a military strong enough that no one decided to. I mean, yeah, I know there was some aircraft violation over the space, and there was some bombing, but there was no real major attack on Switzerland. So they won World War II in that sense. Okay. So their military achieved the goal. So if you can convince your enemy to do something that you want them to do without fighting the big battle, simply by maneuvering, like if they could surround Kiev and the Ukrainians go, oh, we give up, and you never really fired a shot. I'm not saying there's not skirmish warfare, but there's no real assault on Kiev, or there's no real big battle. Well, then you win. You want a victory simply by getting the enemy to do what you want it to do. So what goal is Russia going to do by attacking Kiev? Force the president out of Kiev? Well, both the current president and one of the previous ones, the one that got deposed in the coup. Now, the one that got deposed in the coup is back in Kiev, saying all the right things and wandering around carrying a PKM, I think, machine gun, or PK machine gun, I forget, I don't know which model, wearing a bulletproof vest, wandering around and giving interviews. I don't know if he's doing anything more than that, but he's giving interviews. Now, he was deposed for being too pro-Russia. Now, is he doing it because he's truly a Ukrainian patriot and he's truly wanting to fight Russia, or is he doing that so when Russia wins, Russia can install him, and his installation will get Russia to withdraw from Kiev and only take a third of the country? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm cynical like that to think that, yeah, he's saying all the right stuff to the news media, so it's helping the Ukrainian cause for now, but if the current, I don't forget how to pronounce his name, but the current one, sorry if I don't get all these names right. The actor, if he flees the country, this other guy, well, I'm back in charge now, and signs a peace agreement with Russia that Russia is willing to accept. I don't know if he's there to do it. Maybe, again, I don't know his motives or what his goal is. So, but if the Russians keep fighting, and even if they abandon at some point Kiev, get the political leaders out of Kiev, the president and the former president and the parliament and whatever, get them out of Kiev, but they're still in Ukraine. Well, what have you achieved? You now control a city or a ruin of a city. But what does that achieve? Because if your troops are sitting in that city and you can't fly in resupplies, because if in any transport planes, they might get shot out of the sky by Stinger missiles or Starstreak missiles or whatever it is. So you don't fly any supplies in, and all of this ground supplies that are coming in have to be escorted by large numbers of troops. What are you doing? You're Napoleon sitting in a burnt out Moscow waiting to starve to death. What have you achieved? Russia has not sent in enough troops to occupy large areas of land. Yanukovych was kicked out by the coup, yeah. And actually, he's in Minsk. Okay, so yeah, okay, Yanukovych, yeah, he's in Minsk. Okay, sorry, I'm not keeping track of all the details here, but I have seen him in some of the stuff. But I thought he was saying good stuff. I don't know, but so. I don't know what they achieve, what they're going to achieve by planting the Russian flag on top of whatever governmental Capitol building, where the parliament meets or where the president's office is. What are they going to achieve by putting a Russian flag on top of that? Okay, are they planning on fighting a protracted counterinsurgency warfare like the U.S. did after they planted their flag on top of all of Saddam Hussein's palaces? He had multiple of them. We had flags on top of them. Yay, America, we got it. And then the war they kept fighting. And we finally won that war against Saddam Hussein. We got him. We got his 2 sons. They're dead. We got them. Now we installed a puppet government that's now a puppet government more of Iran now. But, whether that's a net positive or not, I don't know. But we did achieve a victory after a long counterinsurgency warfare against the Baathists. We defeated the Baathists in Iraq. That is clear. Poroshenko was accused by Zelensky for some reason, returned to Ukraine for his trial shortly before the war, and now he's trying to get political points. Yeah, Ragar. I don't know. The details of some of what's going on in Zelensky. Yeah. I keep thinking of what movie? Can anybody get the movie? Probably not. I'm not going to tell you what movie I'm thinking of. It's an old one, but aren't they all? There's actually 2 movies with a Zelensky, but the same, but just a remake of the original. So I just see this as opening up of a protracted, if the Ukrainians, and they seem to be willing to fight, and the West seems to be willing to send in weapons and munitions, it seems like it's just opening up a protracted insurgency. And I don't know that the Russians are going to win that. No, not Dr. Strangelove. No, not the Big Lebowski. A hint, it's a World War II movie. Tell you guys some other time, maybe next week if no one gets it here or later on. But, so it's a movie, World War II movie. One of the major characters is, I don't know if it's the same spelling, but then again, they're just simply translating Cyrillic into English, and you might translate it in different spellings. But no, not Weird Al Yankovic, Starstreak. It's a World War II movie. Zelensky. So I don't think the Russians can win in that sense. Now, can the Russians take Ukraine or take Kiev? Can they take Mariupol? Can they take Kharkov? Yeah, I think they can. I think Russia has the ability to take those cities. After they do that, will the Ukrainians sign some sort of peace agreement, giving up half the country or a third of the country, a big enough chunk that Putin goes home, and sign a pledge to never join NATO and not to allow any NATO forces ever into their country? Maybe, but actually, if the Ukrainians are going to fight, I don't know that he can do that. And I think eventually there'll be enough pressure, particularly not so much by the people of Russia, though the people of Russia were there for bringing down the Soviet Union primarily because not only, but primarily because of Afghanistan. Afghanistan collapsed the Soviet Union. There are other reasons, but I would say primarily, and it was sort of a popular uprising and a dissatisfaction with Gorbachev's government. Gorbachev was a reformer, and that was maybe part of the reason that it started the collapse. But I think this might collapse Putin's government at some point. I think the Russians would be happy with neutral Ukraine, who signs no NATO agreements and recognizes Poroshenko's decision about Crimea is invalid. Okay. Here's my biggest argument against that, is why they would be happy with that. I mean, they might be willing to accept that now, today. No, this is not what I'm looking for. Another different map. Here, this is the map I'm looking for. This is why I don't think they'll be happy with it. Why has Russia, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, propped this communist, pro-Soviet, I mean, they actually say they want the return of the Soviet Union, microstate that's along a river that only exists because Russia supplies them with money and munitions. These guys, I do think, also only exist because Russia supplies. I think all of these. I think Ukraine could have taken the Donbass if Russia wasn't supplying money and munitions. Obviously, Russia directly invaded Crimea, and the South Ossetia and Abkhazia or whatever in Georgia. I think these. I don't know. They're whatever. I don't know if they're. I think they're ethnic Russians, but I don't know. I think. But why do they maintain this? That is my biggest argument. They've maintained this since the fall, including they were funding it during the Yeltsin years, when Boris Yeltsin was in charge of Russia. They were supplying this. This is because of a strategic objective. This isn't, supposedly Boris Yeltsin offered to return Königsberg to Germany, and Bush said no. I don't know why he said no, either because it was going to open up a can of worms, whether it should go to Germany or should go to Poland or go to Lithuania, or what, but they should have just said, yes, please, let's take it back and whatever. But somebody in Russia has been supplying this force. And so there's got to be a strategic reason to keep this alive. So they might be happy today, Ragnar, getting a neutral Ukraine, but I don't think that's the long-term goal. I think that it's the long-term goal is to return or have Ukraine a true puppet state or an actual part of the Russian Federation. And that is my strongest evidence for it. Hello, Van Bishop. The big prize is Odessa, but I doubt Putin does not have intermediate goals. Absolutely, and that's what I said. I think it's I know you weren't here at the beginning, but we could use this map here. I think it's the current objective would be sort of south of the Dnieper and east of the Dnieper. Whether Kharkov is end up in the Russian side or the Ukrainian side, I don't know. But somewhere like this, I think he would be willing to stop and maybe a regime change. Not necessarily a puppet state, but a regime change in Kiev that would, sign agreements that this area is Russian sovereign territory and not Ukrainian. And like you say, intermediate goals, Odessa, whatnot, yes, or eventual goals. But whether they would allow some sort of Western Ukraine, way Western Ukraine exist, maybe, I don't know. But I see them looking at also, of course, Königsberg area, that little micro bit of Russia, as meaning they also want to go after the Baltic states. So yeah, that's sort of my thing. So I guess that's sort of it today. I don't know if anyone has any comments, questions for me to address before I end this. I'm very willing to do so. Probably, unless there's big news next week, I'll probably go back to normal, whether it's Hearts of Iron 3 or Hearts of Iron 4, playing some of that. Not that we won't maybe mention an update and things, but probably not a scheduled talk like this. But maybe in 2 weeks from now, if enough stuff has gone on, changed, make it interesting, I'll do this again if you guys want to have me do this again. If there's interest, and of course anybody watching later, simply post comments, questions below. I'll try to answer them either in chat or in an update some point. Love to hear what you think. Well, okay, since I don't see any comments, I guess we'll end this tomorrow. I'll be back with hopefully Arno and Starstreak and a few others playing some War Thunder. I think we will do that tomorrow. So if you want to join me for more just gameplay and whatnot, hopefully we'll see you then. Hope this has been fun, entertaining. I've enjoyed talking with you and liked your input. So see you next time. Oh, and I guess I got to say it. If you haven't already, please hit the like button on YouTube and follow or subscribe on Twitch or YouTube as you prefer. So thanks, Van Bishop. Yep, goodbye. Have a good day, evening, whatever it is where you are. Thanks, everyone.